Well, hello people of Defend the House, and welcome back to our annual top 10 list for the year of gaming. This is the 11th time we've done this now, I believe. We're in the second decade? Is that the right word? Decade? Second decade of doing these lists.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's horrifying actually, and disgusting. But if you happen to be new and you've never listened/watched one of these before, it's a classical top 10 list of games for the year, but me and Jamison have a list each. We do not know each other's lists, so there is always the potential for 20 games. We've never had that, and probably never will, but you know, maybe one year.
Maybe one day, yeah.
Yeah. And I think before we start, we normally just have a quick recap/review of the year in general when it comes to gaming and how we felt about 2023.
Before we did that, I wanted to say one thing that sort of leads into that as well. But first, I wanted to do two thank yous. One is to everyone listening for a decade and now 11 years. It's weird that we've been doing this for this long and people actually care. You know, this was the first video thing we ever started doing on the channel in 2013.
True. And we're still here.
So it's been fun to do it for 10 years. Yeah. And yeah, sort of leading to a 2023 general feelings recap. It feels important to say thanks to all the people that make video games, because man, it seems like the worst time ever to be making video games.
Yeah.
Like, people bust their ass to make things and just get punished endlessly for it, it seems like.
Fired.
And fired and abused and overworked. And that sucks because, you know, there were a lot of really interesting games this past year. But they were sort of all overshadowed by, like, the AAA industry especially being horrible. And that sucks.
Yeah, the industry news is usually terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, not to like start on a low note, but that's where my heart is just like, oh, people dedicate their lives to making video games, and it sounds like the worst job ever.
It really does. It really does.
It's like really appreciated that people do it because, man.
Not by a lot of people, it seems, but we do.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate games. They're fun.
Yeah. 2023. Why don't you lead with your feelings of 2023? Because I feel like you feel like how I felt in 2022, which is disconnected, maybe, a little bit.
Obviously, this stuff has come up a lot during our podcast across the year. But for anyone who maybe just watches the main channel stuff, the Tower, and these top 10 chats, yeah, Joe's had a bit of trouble this year connecting with a lot of stuff. I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. Again, we've covered all this on the podcast, but, you know, this is 11 years of me and you being pretty deep down the variety gaming well of playing a lot of AAA stuff, AA stuff, indie. We kind of, we don't play everything, but we try to really, between us, we get close. Like, we stretch out and we touch a lot of facets of video games.
Yeah.
And I did hit some walls this year. AAA for me was a bit of a struggle bus. I just couldn't connect with a lot of things, a lot of games that people seem to really revere. Maybe because there is some formulaic aspects to the AAA industry. They're very expensive, they take a long time to make, and some people don't want to risk doing new and crazy things like maybe Kojima can.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting old, dude. I've played a lot of stuff, and I've always been I get bored quite quickly of similar things, repetition, playing the same formats, genres, etc. over and over again. So there was certain things which I just couldn't get behind. And I also hit a bit of a wall with video game writing and storytelling this year. Looking through my list, it's a very gameplay heavy list. I don't think there is like a big story thing in here, a narrative focused thing in here at all.
Yeah.
Maybe that's up for debate, we'll get to it. I've actually just started consuming a lot of other media over the last 2 years than maybe I did before. I kind of just played video games for like 7 years of my life.
Same, yeah.
I watched the big movies and I try to watch a few TV shows. But now I make time for reading books and I watch more TV than I used to, and I take evenings off just to watch movies and rewatch movies that I liked. So I think across the last 2 years I've been consuming more writing and storytelling across all medias than usual. And
it really highlights how shitty video game writing is.
Yeah. Thing is, we also we put a lot of hours into what we do for YouTube, so when it comes to hours per day to consume video games, I don't have a lot anymore, and I just want to play a game. I want to play it. I don't want to watch a game. I don't want to listen to a game. I don't want to read a game. I want to play a game. And maybe that's just a change in what I like, my personality, the time I have to consume this stuff, or how much writing I'm consuming in other, maybe better mediums.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't want to list specific games because, I don't want to spoil the lists. But certain things didn't appear on my list for certain reasons. And it's going to be interesting going forward how that affects what I play and what I like. Because games like to talk nowadays a lot. At least it feels that way.
I agree. And there are definitely a few exceptions this year that we'll talk about where I very much liked it for the writing. And I still can very much enjoy a game for story purposes. But I would say for probably 80% of the year, I was in the same place of just please stop talking. I just want to play the game as well. And I think a lot of that just comes down to, I don't know. Games this year felt overwritten in a lot of places. Games that didn't need to have any story had 100 hours, it felt of writing in it.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention anything either, but there are a few, and some of them are even on my list where it's I still like this game, but man, did it really need all these words? So there was a lot of that, I would agree, from me as well. Just I just want to be active with my fingers on the controller or keyboard and have a really fun time moving and interacting with the game, because there's a lot of story to be consumed in other mediums, and those mediums are much better for storytelling because they were invented for it instead of being adapted into it the way video games are.
And I will say my list really came together quite recently, honestly. Let me do a little count here. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the games on this list were the last few months, honestly.
Yeah.
3 months ago, I had 6 games on this list, and I took 3 months off video games just because it was the post Starfield and Alan Wake era where I really hit a wall with being talked at.
Yeah.
And it came together in the end. This list of 10 games is quite good. So I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic about 2023 in general. That was more a little TED talk on how I feel my taste specifically changed this year, and how going forward that might make certain big AAA things just not appealing to me.
Yeah, and that's how it goes sometimes, right? And games are also sort of in a we're finally hitting the transition period for console generations, so it'll be interesting to see what the next 2 years hold. But yeah, I would say this was a fairly inverse of the 2022 experience for me. 2022, I just thought, I thought 2022, looking back at my list from 2022, I'm I liked 3 or 4 games last year, in 2022. And I'm just oh my God, the rest of this list was stretching it. And none of them some of them haven't really grown. Some of them have gotten worse in my mind, and I don't know. there were other factors as well, but 2022 was just kind of a snooze fest. But I thought 2023 was quite enjoyable, more or less from start to finish. The one big sort of genre hole that I felt was indie stuff.
Right, yeah, I forgot to say that.
I really just... Pretty much, it's weird. I normally have like a good variety in my top 10 of like AAA and indie and weird.
Me too.
But I look at my top 10 and it's almost all like pretty big games.
Yeah.
It's pretty much
same.
all big games. And it feels a little weird. And in my honorable mentions, there's a bunch of interesting indie games, but they never clicked. I wasn't able to stick with like any of them this year. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, because there were a lot of ones that I thought were cool, but I'm not sure. I think part of it is sort of like you mentioned, our increase in like work time on recording stuff. You know, you spend 2 hours a day looking at games, like playing them for recording, and then another, 3 to 5 hours looking at them in a Premiere Pro.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's just like, oh my God, I have to get out of my office. And when I go to my living room, I don't know, there's just something like a barrier for me of just like, I don't want to turn a console on and look at a video game on a huge TV. I don't want to run my computer out via HDMI so I can play indie games not in my office. So there was a bit of a wall, and I keep looking at the Steam Deck being like, I wonder if this is my solution of just like being able to pick away at indie stuff in a different space that isn't sort of the two like media consumption rooms basically of the living room and the office. So I'm not entirely sure, but I also just think most of the smaller games this year were like really cool conceptually, but just I couldn't stick with them for whatever reason. Not sure why. But that when there are no indie games, it does sort of feel like the balance is a little off. Thankfully, there were a lot of really interesting big games and sort of the double A, if you want to call it that. There were some interesting ones of those as well, which is good. We need more medium games than ever before. So yeah, and I also noticed, and I'm going to save it till the very end once we've talked about all the games, but there's a very interesting trend between all my games this year that I realized last night. Pretty much every game on the list, probably 8 of the 10 are like, this reminds me of a certain period in time. And it was interesting to realize. Yeah, so.
Okay.
But yeah, I had like 6 games that were really easy, and then the last 4 were like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was an interesting year, to say the least.
I've got some spice on this list. Some of my placements are controversial.
I think some of mine might be too. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have, we like what we like, and that's just the way it goes. Like, we have our own tastes, and they often, more often than not, seem to be diverging from the general consensus.
Definitely.
And that makes these videos fun. So
yeah, it makes the comments love us.
Oh yeah, well, Star Wars #1.
I was thinking about Star Wars, yeah.
I think that's it. I went first last year, so that means you're up for number 10 if you're ready to get into it. I am.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say, last disclaimer before we get moving, I did not play Baldur's Gate 3 this year. Actually, it's a lie. I put 8 hours in, but you know, 8 hours is like 80 seconds compared to, in comparison to other games. So yeah, when it comes to games missed, I think that's the only thing I have to disclaim.
Right.
Again, I just said I wasn't like in the mood for stories. So I played like 8 hours of Baldur's Gate 3. It seemed really cool. I wasn't very good at the combat, but I'm sure I could get into it. It is on my backlog for some time in the future. I've never played...
When you're retired.
Yeah, I've never played a... What's the genre called?
Computer RPG?
CRPG? I've never played a single one of those. Like, I think I played Divinity 2 for like 3 hours, and now Baldur's Gate 3 for 8 hours, and it's like on my shame list to at least get through one of those games in that genre, and it might as well be Baldur's Gate 3. So yeah, that will somewhere in the future pop up on the podcast when I have the time. But obviously it was the actual game of the year according to Mr. Jeff Keighley. So
Right.
should probably mention that I didn't play it to completion or enough to like put it on the list.
Your whole list is invalid now. Everyone will be. Everyone's plugging their ears. They're not listening anymore.
I'll get to it, man. It's fucking like, so long.
That game is very long.
It's so long. All right, number 10 for 2023. Maybe this is gonna be a little bit of a surprise for you on its placement. It kind of was for me. It's Remnant 2 is my number 10. We haven't finished this game. I haven't finished this game, I should say. We have a co-op run going with our podcast host Ben, and I'm also doing a solo run. And between those two runs, I've actually seen quite a lot of the biomes now.
Yeah.
I kind of expected a bit more from Remnant 2. I don't mean to dive into our top 10 list with like a negative tone, but for context, for people who haven't seen maybe all the lists, I am a pretty big fan of Remnant 1. It was like this niche little thing that no one played, and then Remnant 2 came out, and it was a lot more revered critically, and a lot more people played it. We waited quite a while to get to it, just playing other things, and we were like interested in playing the game co-op. So I was maybe expecting a bit more of a jump forward between Remnant 2 and Remnant 1, and certain areas have definitely got better. I would say the environments, the world design, that stuff, the aesthetics are much improved over the first game. But apart from that, I'm actually finding the solo playthrough a little less tuned, like accurately tuned for solo play than the first game.
Yeah.
I beat the first game on my own, and I definitely had some challenging fights, but it felt completely natural. And in the second game, I'm playing it with the dog class, where the dog can actually revive me, I think at least once in a boss fight. And it just doesn't feel as good as the first game did. I am enjoying our co-op playthrough, but a co-op playthrough is a very different tone to solo. You're kind of like talking amongst each other, the aggro is really split, so it's a much more casual experience, and I quite like when it comes to this genre, this whatever you want to call it, from software type thing. I do like playing it solo because I like taking on the boss myself and overcoming those challenges. And so far my solo playthrough just hasn't felt as like balanced as the first game did. I still really like the format. It's still a really unique property, and I'm definitely happy the second one's seen more success and more people have played it, because it's just a cool idea and a cool studio, and the more money they get in their pockets, the better. Would be interested in the third game, or just more, I don't know, From Software shooter stuff, maybe in a completely different context. But yeah, the game just isn't working as good for a solo playthrough, and that's kind of like the main thing I like, as much as our co-op evenings have been fun with this game. Still really like Remnant. I am happy 2 is doing well. Yeah, but I think I was more fond of the first one so far.
Yeah.
I haven't finished the game, but I think I'm only missing one biome that I haven't seen yet. And I just think the game needs a bit more enemy variety per area and more weapon variety. In my solo playthrough, I haven't got a second primary weapon in like 6 hours.
Yeah, it's interesting. I played like 7 hours of it solo, and then we played about 7 hours co-op, and the two playthroughs have felt radically different, and everything you just said about solo is exactly how I felt about it solo. I thought it just didn't feel tuned for solo at all. The boss fights were extremely frustrating. And yeah, I got like one new weapon in the 7 hours of play. But then in co-op, we've found all sorts of new weapons, and everything just works way better in co-op. It's interesting.
It does,
Yeah. And looking at the weapon list, there's like 100 weapons in that game.
Yeah, where are they?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean we found them in co-op, but I feel like in solo you just have to play way more. Maybe because in co-op you conquer a lot more territory more quickly, so you're progressing faster. I don't really know.
I've been very thorough in my solo playthrough, like checking every place.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some cool additions, like the strange puzzles amongst some of the levels. There's also just like more interesting events at the end of like the small dungeons, bigger variety in biomes, like I said. But yeah, just I don't know. I was expecting a little bit more. The balance feels weird, and again, like the movement is also the exact same, with that kind of like slow, clunky dive roll being your only method of evasion. And yeah, I still like the franchise. I'm glad it's doing well, but was expecting a bit more from this. I know it's weird to start a top 10 list with a bit of a negative tone, but for people who know my taste, Remnant 2 should probably be higher on my list.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where it was, like where the original was for you.
Probably not a whole lot higher, because it was still like a niche, kind of strange, very double-A thing.
Yeah.
But I think I got caught up a little too much in critical reception and the amount people were talking about it. But regardless, I am happy that it did well, I think. And that people played it.
Yeah, it seems like that was the case. I think they said it was fairly successful, which is good.
I'm still looking forward to playing through it and finishing it. I've heard some infamous things about the last boss, which should be interesting.
Bad, infamous, not enjoyable type?
Yeah, I've heard it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Okay, I mean, I found every boss to be a pain in the ass solo, but a breeze in co-op, so I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. But I hope whoever makes that game, I can't remember who they are, my apologies, I hope they continue to do well and make more things.
They're doing weird stuff, and I like that.
Yeah. I'm surprised no one has jumped on the From Software shooter kind of like hybrid genre.
Yeah.
Maybe they will.
Maybe they will. Yeah, so I have a brief trend for the sort of like first 3 games on the list. Well, I don't know, it sort of applies to it definitely applies to 2 of them, but the third one is maybe a little more. Anyways, I have a few unfinished games on my list, which is abnormal. As in, I never finished them, not there in early access or whatever.
Right.
Or unpolished, because that, anyways. I was struggling to put together the last few, and I think that struggle was because I was like, oh, I haven't finished these games. I can't put it on the list, and I don't know why I was thinking that. I mean, my list has no rules. I do whatever I want.
I know what you're saying, though.
But, I realized, and this will probably be a surprising number 10 as well, but I realized looking back on the year that it was a major highlight, even if I did not finish it, and that was Hi-Fi Rush.
Oh, that was this year?
That was like January 20th or something.
That feels like a long time ago.
It's been out for over a year as of this recording. But looking back on the year, I was like, oh, this game, I actually had a really great time with it, and I did not finish it, but that's okay. I got about 75% of the way through it, though, which is more than I ever thought was going to be possible because of the style of game, which is like combat to the beat, basically. I did hit a wall where the difficulty, there's like this weird, crazy sort of Sekiro enemy that you have to parry like a bunch of times to the beat perfectly, and I just couldn't do it. But that was okay, because, and I wanted to give it like its props, because this style of game, I don't know, I'm just gonna call it a rhythm game, but it's not, Rock Band, but it is a game to the rhythm or to the beat. None of them have worked at all for me. I think it's like a really cool idea, but what was the Zelda one? Cadence of Hyrule, and the weird Hell one, and the BPM. These games, like, none of them have worked at all for me. Like, I played like 15 minutes of Cadence of Hyrule. Like, I literally have no idea how to play this video game. But because I don't know what beat is to music. That's what I've realized over the years. I don't know what it is, and I can't hear it. I don't understand it. It's the metronome ticking, and I don't get it. But they did a lot of really smart stuff with this game. With the, the beats starts fairly slow and accessible, but they also make the entire environment also move to that.
Yeah.
So like all the signs and lights and everything is just sort of tapping its foot along with you. And it made it surprisingly easy to keep up with it. I did not turn on the sort of metronome ticker across the bottom. I found that really distracting, actually. And so I was able to play it basically like what it is, which is like a character action game, playing it to the beat. And all that stuff worked, and it made it so that I could play that game 75% of the way through, which is, 6 hours or 7 hours, and that is more than I've ever managed with any of these games. And I think it's such a cool idea.
Yeah,
I wish it was easier for dumb people like us
to be smart.
No, it's not. It's like a fundamental just brain understanding thing that I just don't get, right?
Yeah.
But they did a great job with it, and honestly, as successful as all the gameplay stuff was, what really kept me coming back was the personality of the game. I found it just, it's probably the most charming thing I've played all year. All of the character work, the visuals, the music, the sort of humor, the visual flourishes, it was all just incredibly charming all the way through. It's funny, it's endearing, there's some weird, goofy stuff in it, there's a hilarious Twin Peaks reference.
Yeah.
There's just... it's just a weird, cool thing. And the fact that it just shadow dropped on Game Pass from Microsoft, it was one of those things where you're like, this is what I want to see more of from in between the big, boring Starfields and Spider-Mans and God of Wars. You know, like, let these companies have a lot of money and a lot of people. Let them spend a few years making a weird rhythm throwback sort of PS2 feeling game.
But it was also randomly from the Evil Dead guys, which was
and it's from the Evil
strange.
Dead team, which is bizarre. Yeah, they went from Evil Dead 2 to Ghostwire Tokyo to this, and it's like so tonally different. I just found the entire experience to be really, really enjoyable.
Is Evil Dead right? Evil Dead? Is that correct?
No, Evil Dead is the movies. The Evil Within.
Evil Within.
There we go. Yeah. Right from the get-go, I was like, oh, this game has like buckets of charm, and it carries that all the way through. And I should really go and watch the rest of it because I actually liked the characters and want to see what other jokes they have and what other fun moments they have, because it was like laugh out loud funny on multiple occasions, which is not something most games can say. So good for them. I want just more things that sort of have this energy, not necessarily rhythm games, but like just weird out of nowhere, haha, we made this weird thing, it's $40 or free on Game Pass and it's out right now. It was just a fun sort of moment last year. A good way to start things off. Yeah,
I played a chunk of it and I enjoyed it. I think that game does absolutely everything in its power to get you into the beat.
Yeah.
And I still struggled with it. And I don't know, there's something, I'm kind of with you with having that brain thing of really struggling to get into the beat within these video games. It's, I would say that I think I'm quite a rhythmic person outside of video games, but it's something about patting your head and rubbing your tummy where you're playing a video game and also doing it to a beat which feels so unnatural to me that I have to focus so hard. I never get into a flow state. I was playing I think I got through 3 of the major levels in that game, and I just never felt like I was getting better. I always had to have the on-screen circle beat visualizer thing, and I was leaned into my monitor, just duh, 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 duh. And I don't know, just never getting better at a game and having to concentrate so hard in the game, getting more multi-layered. I just kind of tapped out of it. I think my brain doesn't work for that genre, but I respect that game a lot. It was cool.
Yeah, I would love to know what it is about that makes it so hard for us. Because I like you obviously listen to lots of music, and I don't necessarily pay attention to music very much. But I don't know. I have it in my head all the time, and we work with music all the time, and I understand the concept. But it is a very weird thing when it comes to games.
I don't know, the gamer instincts are stronger than the musician instincts.
I guess so, yeah.
I can't hold back a button press when I want to hit something, even if the beat isn't ready yet. I just want to hit something.
Yeah. I definitely got into the flow state with it more often than not, and it was very satisfying when that would happen. And then it was inversely extremely unsatisfying when I was getting the offbeat every time, and I was like, oh, fuck off. And even when I would do a level and be like, wow, I did so well that level, it would still pop up the score at the end and be like, you got a C. I was like, fuck, are you kidding? I owed that level. I was on beat all the time. And it's like, no, you were on beat 49% of the time. I was like, oh, whatever, I'll take it.
I think I like to get better at a game as it goes on, and I like to feel like I'm mastering it. And with that genre, I can just never achieve that at all. I feel like I'm just tripping over my feet for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe one day, I don't know.
I think there's also an aspect of that game's personality that makes it feel a little more appropriate when you are sort of stumbling through it. Because it's sort of a scrappy, goofus character, and I don't know. Yeah, it felt less serious than something like the Doom shooter one, where it's just like if you're not playing perfectly. Yeah, so I don't know. I think like you said, they did everything in their power to make it as accessible as possible, and I think it worked for me 75% of the time, and then I couldn't progress anymore. But that's okay. I'm okay with not beating a game. I had a great time with it in those 7 hours or so.
Nice. All right, my number 9 is Cocoon.
Right.
I don't really have a lot to say about it. We talked about it very briefly on the podcast. The game has one of the coolest aesthetics of the year for me. It has such a strange, twisting, alien look to it, but it looks like glossy and clean in a way which I really like. And the game basically has no UI. I can't remember now if it has any UI elements, but it's really just a clean and sharp looking game. But I think the most impressive thing about the game is, in theory, it should be very complex. You're essentially diving into different levels which are physical objects in other layers of the game which you can carry around and interact with. That's going to make no sense in a sentence, but maybe if you played the game or seen the game, it might make some sense. And I feel like when developers do a concept like this, it becomes like this mental exhaustion spinning plate thing where you're like, okay, A was here, B was here, and Cocoon wasn't like that in a way which might be a negative for some people. I know some people really like seeing a bundle of red thread tangled up and your job is to mentally untangle all of this shit in a puzzle format. But Cocoon makes you feel really smart in a way where you're not actually being really smart. It's just a game with great direction. And I just found it really well paced and really satisfying. And I finished in like 2 sittings, and I just thought it was really fun and cool. I think when I started Cocoon, I'd played a bunch of quite challenging games. I can't remember exactly what I was playing, but Cocoon was surprisingly easygoing. I mean, it's way more easygoing than you would expect for a game which works like this. Yeah, super tight, super clean. Some really cool boss fights and aesthetics and sound design. Yeah, if you like puzzle games, I would give it a go. I think we said in the podcast that the finale could have been a bit more climactic and maybe a bit more demanding. But yeah, it's more the cool factor and the pacing of this game which really stood out for me. And I think I played it at the right time of the year for what I was kind of looking for.
Yeah, that game was... I enjoyed that game, even though I sort of dunked on it, or it felt like I was dunking on it on the podcast. I had a good time with it as well. And it was nice to just... That was another thing we should have put at the start. It's like, it was nice to just like be able to beat a game in a short period of time and not spend months with it. That will come up more later on in the list, I would say.
Maybe that's the thing I was looking for.
Yeah.
It was like 6 hours, maybe less?
Yeah, I think it was like, 4 or 5 for me. And yeah, that's another aspect of like what I meant when indie games were missing this year for me. It's just like, because one of the nice things with a good indie game is like you can get through it in a short period of time and it's satisfying and you have a good time with it. And Cocoon was one of the only game. Cocoon might be the only indie game I beat this year. I don't know. I should go look. But yeah, it was like a very accessible, very pleasant 4 or 5 hour experience.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, number 9 is a multiplayer game. I can't believe it. It's The Finals.
Ah, yeah, nice.
Which just snuck in because it came out December like 15th or something, and I only started playing it in January, so I technically haven't put any time into it at all last year. Actually, that's not true. I guess we played the alpha for like an afternoon in March, but so it feels a little weird, but I also want to acknowledge verbally that I am cursing this game and dooming it to die by putting it on my top 10 list, because every multiplayer game I've ever put on one of these lists turns to ash in my hands about 8 months after the fact, so...
Yeah, but not many multiplayer games haven't turned to ash at this point, so...
That's true.
The odds are not in your favor.
No. And that's fine. I've not put like an enormous amount of time into the finals, about 12 hours, and that includes our recording sessions, but the game is just fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else, like how to quantify that too much, because it's just, all I do is quick cache the unranked default mode, and I mostly just play as the big dumb heavy, And the game just has a great sense. It's got like all the right elements of good game feel plus objective
Chaos.
play plus chaos, which is what I want. Like that's what made Halo 3 so powerful for so many years. That's what made Battlefield, when it was really great, so fun. Is like, this game reminds me probably the most of Bad Company 2 of any game I've played in a long time, which isn't surprising since most of the main senior people on this game are from they're Battlefield people. So, but just focusing players around an objective and then giving them lots of tools and letting everything blow up real good and having like good physics and interactions and stuff like that just makes for weird, goofy things happening all the time. And the Finals is extremely good at doing that. I think it's one of the best games I've played multiplayer-wise for letting you be annoying in your own special way. And,
Yeah.
And holy fuck, it's so annoying to deal with some of the versions of annoying that I don't play as, aka like the stabby people or the sniper or like the big sledgehammer. All of those playstyles are annoying, and I don't like them. And I don't like dealing with them, but I know also that my playstyle is super fucking annoying as well, and so I'm annoying everyone else. And you can tell in a multiplayer game when you've pissed someone off, right? Because they just like start hounding you and sort of bullying you. And I feel like that happens a lot in the Finals, and I like that. Because I know I pissed someone off with
Yeah, I love
bullshit.
being annoying in games. It's great.
Yeah. It's just a lot of fun, and it's full of lots of really intelligent game design decisions. Like there's just 1,000 little smart things, and a really good like example of that is, I didn't even realize this until recently, when you revive someone with the defibrillator, they come back with 50% HP. Instead of 100%. When you revive them manually, which is slow, they come back with 100% HP. And like that is a perfect sort of summary of like smart balance and trade-offs. It's easier to, you revive someone quickly, but they have less health, so they're more vulnerable, or you risk it to revive them slowly and they come back with full HP. That's the sort of design thought that is applied to pretty much everything in the game, and it's surprisingly well balanced for how much stuff there is, for how there's 3 different character classes with different health pools and tons of different weapons. I think it needs more maps. There's only 4 maps in the game, and they do a good job with like different times of day and fog and weather and events and stuff like that, but it's a little lacking for maps. And I think their solo modes, or like I think all the modes that aren't the main mode are actively bad, but I don't really think that's so much of a problem, at least for now, because the main mode I just find quite fun for, you jump in and play like 2 games every 4 days or whatever, and be like, that was a great time. And then I just move on. And yeah, so it's the first multiplayer game I've had any fun with since Apex Legends, which was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's saying something. So I had to put it on here.
I need to put more time into it, for sure.
I also just like all of its aesthetics. I think like
Yeah, me too.
the maps look like, the art style, the clothing, all of it's like weirdly good and just sort of clean,
Sharp.
and modern and just sharp. Yeah, the whole thing just has a good style to it that I like a lot. And yeah, it reminds me of Bad Company 2 more than anything, and that sort of chaos that I miss a lot from multiplayer games. It just doesn't feel very, despite it being objective based, it just doesn't feel very serious. And that's what I like.
I think my only fear with that game is skill gap.
Of course.
And when at the moment, it feels a little niche. Maybe that's just comparing it to the mega big AAA boys.
Yeah.
I'm just worried that it's a game that I would like to play every now and then. Saturday night, it feels like a cool game to play with the boys, maybe with a couple of beers.
Yeah.
And if it gets really sweaty, that could maybe be a deterrent for like jumping in and playing it. Because to me, it really feels, like you said, like a casual fun time. But the tool set and the like elements and layers of strategy you can incorporate like seem really deep.
Yeah.
Like it seems like you can do some crazy shit in that game. And part of me is actually really excited to see what the highest level of play looks like. Because I can only imagine in like 2 years what people are doing in this game with the physics and some of the harder to use builds. But yeah, I think if I had had more time to play it this year, it also would have been on my list. And I do want to play more of it. I'm just hoping that it doesn't turn into a sweat fest as maybe the player base goes down. Maybe that's a pessimism thing. Hopefully a lot of new people continue to come in so that I can play against them, because that's me.
It has the advantage of being free to play, which I think is vital for, a new multiplayer game. So I can definitely tell when I play, like if I play after, 7 p.m. Pacific time, it's a nightmare, which makes sense because it's late. Like most of the world is asleep. I'm playing against sickos on the West Coast or insane, ultra skilled, like Japanese or Korean players, and it's wild. Like it's playing a completely different game when you're up against good players. But I think, it's almost assuredly going to become a sweaty nightmare, unplayable bullshit, horrible thing in 6 months. But
great.
Because every game has become that, but I'm just sort of pretending like that's not going to happen. And when I play it, I would say 80% of the time I've had a good time and felt like the balance was there and people were just sort of playing, and just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is an enormous skill gap in that game, and it will make it... They'll have to keep the balance there, and they'll have to keep the matchmaking smart to keep it accessible for new players to come in, because there's a lot going on in that game. It's nice to have a multiplayer game, and that's fun. There's just something timeless about shooting people. Shooting other players and pissing them off,
Yeah.
Like, shooting AI is fun, but when you're doing it against another human, it's just, I really don't get that very much anymore, so. And there is a timeless quality to that.
All right, my number 8. Just looking at the list here, I think at least up to number 7, we are not going to have any overlapping games. Because my number 8 is Mario Wonder, a Nintendo game on the list. Holy shit.
Wow.
Oh, wait, there's another one.
Yeah.
I forgot that game came out. I don't have a whole lot to say about Mario Wonder. I think a large portion of the game is actually not that interesting. I think the 2D old-style Mario gameplay hasn't aged that well, in my opinion. But there's something like really strange and endearing about the format. If people haven't played Mario Wonder, it's basically like a regular-ass 2D Mario level, and in the middle is a seed which makes everything go fucking weird.
Yeah.
And I just found it exciting every single level to just see what was going to happen when you found the Wonder Seed. And that
it's a good gimmick.
That gimmick just worked all the way through. I don't play a lot of games on Switch, and I just picked away at it like 2 levels a day. And yeah, just never got bored of it all the way through. There's also like this secondary objective to find some secret entrances to a special world. And I managed to find all of them except for one without a walkthrough, and that actually felt kind of novel for a Nintendo game. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say. It's clean, it plays well because it's Nintendo Mario. And the weirdness felt like an interesting gimmick and captivated me all the way through, and I just couldn't wait to see what shit was going to go down.
Yeah, Mario Wonder is not on my list.
I know.
I know. I really wanted to love that game, and it started strong, but I just find the pace of it is just so easy and thoughtless that I just couldn't. Yeah, it just didn't. I bounced right off of it, and that makes me sad because I really like the idea of 2D Mario. But it's just, I get it. Mario has to be a lot of different things, and I think the sort of more modern exploratory poke around Mario style game works much better in 3D than it does in 2D.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's like there's so much good stuff. Like the game looks so good for a 2D Switch game. All the personality, all the music, Elephant Mario, like everything all that stuff is so good. And maybe I will sort of continue to poke at it, but every time I tried picking it up after the first like 4 levels, I would play like half a level and I would start like dying because I was like, my eyes were basically glazed over and I was hardly even paying attention to what was happening because it was so simple, and it made me a bit sad. Because I was really excited for Mario Wonder, honestly. And it's
I wasn't. That's the weird thing. I didn't give a shit.
I know.
I just got given it for at Christmas from by my sister, and ended up enjoying it.
And it seems great, but yeah.
The special world stuff is a bit more challenging.
Yes, yeah. I did see 1 or 2 of those, and I was like, yes, this is how I want all the levels to be, like a 6 to an 8 out of 10 difficulty. But
yeah.
And it's cool that they tuck those in there, but
you gotta find them. Some of them are really sneaky.
And it makes sense. Like you can't make a hard Mario game, right? Because children have to be able to play it and enjoy it as well. And I get it. Elephant Mario is probably the best new character of 2023.
Yeah, the way he goes through a door and his like fat ass is stuck in the door for a second. The design is so awesome. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, Mario! It was nice to just like see Mario again.
Yeah.
In some form, in a new form.
For me, the 2D format is, I don't know, it's hard to really push the limits of it.
Yeah,
and
especially when Celeste exists.
Yeah. And the gimmick of just basically Mario going on like a psychedelic trip every 2 minutes was just like weird and interesting to me.
It's very funny. It's a hilarious gimmick. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
It's great. Well, actually, my number... Wait, what are we on?
8.
8, yeah. My number 8 is an overlap game. You have had it on your list, and I'm actually surprised it was higher, and I surprised myself with how high I put it, which is Remnant 2.
Oh, shit.
And like I said, I played 7 hours solo, and I fucking hated it.
Oh, shit.
But we played 7 hours co-op, and I just want to keep playing it in co-op because... And I think the main reason it's higher than what you had it at is because I didn't play the first game. And so all of the eccentricities of what Remnant is are new to me. And it is a truly bizarre, fascinating game, I find. And I just find the entire thing to work pretty much perfectly in co-op. And it feels very unique in co-op in the sense that like most co-op that we play is like, Lethal Company or Party Animals or whatever.
Yeah.
And those are fine, but this is like scratching that Destiny itch, but in a way more, I don't know, like intellectually stimulating sense from a game design perspective, because it feels like it's made by aliens a lot of the time in a way that honestly only From Software games feel like all the FromSoft clones don't feel like they were made by aliens except for Remnant, where you're just like, what the fuck is this? Like, those giant puzzles are so weird. All of the like bosses are bizarre. There's just so much strange, fascinating stuff in there, and I really like getting that from Software games, where you play something and there's just so many interesting decisions that they've made with how they designed the game, and that was obviously missing last year because I almost said because there were no new From Software games, and that's not true, but Remnant 2 is the only one that really felt like that to me, where it's just like, this is just made by people that don't really give a shit about like modern design decisions. They're just doing exactly what they want, and it works, and it's really intriguing all the time, I've found so far. And it's a little disappointing that we've gotten the same biome order that I got in single player, but also though pretty much everything we've seen in the same biomes that I saw in single player has been new stuff. So that's a positive, and it's made it still feel pretty fresh. And it may take the rest of the year to finish it in co-op, and that's fine because it's fairly easy to pick up and play. And I just decided to put it on here and not at number 10. I decided to put it up a little bit, sort of like betting on the future in a sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm curious, next year when we do our list, to look back and see where I ended up a year later on the finals and Remnant 2, because I have a feeling I'm going to end up really fondly in looking back on the whole Remnant 2 experience when it's all said and done.
Yeah, there's 2 games on my list which I have not finished, so those are most likely to move around, and one of them is Remnant 2. I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, so...
And I will make a pact here where I will not finish that game solo first.
Okay.
I think I'm a little bit ahead on my solo playthrough. I just finished the Labyrinth, and I'm on like the world after that. But if I get to the last boss, I'm putting that game down solo, and we will finish it co-op first. That is like a pact I'm doing for the team.
Okay, nice. Yeah, it's super interesting. It's a very weird game, and
yeah, super unique.
It's super unique. Yeah, fascinating, bizarre. Like that cube gun we got is just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I just got that solo.
This is such a weird gun. Like, it really reminds me of like actually, I think I just realized it. A big part of the feeling I get from it is that early Destiny 1 feeling when Destiny 1 was actually new and we were playing it. You know, we were like, what is this? Like, what is this mechanic? Like, who is this vendor? What is this currency? And that was. I think a lot of that in Destiny 1 was unintentionally confusing,
yeah.
But it was still intriguing. And, you know, when we went in, like when I did the first raid in Destiny, it was like, what is this? I've never played anything like this. And Remnant 2, and Destiny's just gotten so predictable as it's gone on, which is not surprising. And Remnant 2 really is scratching a lot of that intriguing itch, but also being a good shooter. Like, it's a super solid, fun playing shooter. So...
Yeah.
They did a really good job with that, and I'm glad I picked it up and started playing it with you guys.
I should really move Remnant 2 up one place on my list for one specific mechanic that I realized the other day, which is that when you invest materials in a weapon, you can go to the blacksmith and get all those materials back. You lose the currency you invest to do it, but you get the materials back so you can experiment with different weapons, which no other game does like that.
It's very smart. I also only realized that at the end of our last session. Yeah. And it's
every From Software game, you get like near the end, you get stuck with these two weapons, which you've invested all these things in. And you can't really afford to like reinvest into a whole new set of weapons. But in that game, you can just kind of experiment with everything, which is awesome. I don't know why Elden Ring doesn't have that.
It's got like the FromSoft design ideas, but it also has much better quality of life than FromSoft games, because they still want you to be able to have fun and like experiment and are not so set in their ways, I think. And then that benefits them for just the game is more accessible and more enjoyable. Yeah.
All right. My number 7 is a game which only I played in the entire world, and that is Humanity.
Hey, I played Humanity.
Did you?
Yeah, I played like the first two acts or so.
Okay. Humanity is like Lemmings made by aliens, which is the short synopsis I've got written down. It's from the Tetris Effect guys, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of shows, but in weird ways. It has a really unique and strange art style, and the music in this game is absolutely amazing. I love the weird, again, alien is the word that my brain keeps going to, the weird alien music. It's got a great soundtrack. This is a hard game to talk about. I think on the podcast I was a little shy about going too deep into a discussion about Humanity, because this is a puzzle game where it starts off with a certain format, and then it kind of starts to break the rules of its own format and evolve in ways that you wouldn't expect, and it breaks out of the boundaries it sets and becomes something like completely different at certain points throughout the game, during different levels and different sections. And the revelations and the moments of evolution in this game are really cool. I love it when people break the rules and boundaries of their own games. I kind of talked about this last year with Vampire Survivors and comparing it to Risk of Rain 2, where it sets these rules and then smashes them. And Humanity doesn't quite go that far, but it does radically change as it goes along in ways which really took me by surprise. And it kind of becomes like a completely different game at different sections. And yeah, I don't think I want to say too much about this game. There will be obviously video footage on the screen now. If it looks cool and you like the puzzle genre, there isn't a lot coming out anymore when it comes to good puzzle games, especially ones that are like 15 hours long. It's really unique, and the Tetris Effect guys deserve your attention, at least in an artistic way. Yeah, I give this a high recommendation. It feels like no one played this game this year. My voice is fucking like, I can't clear my throat today, so sorry if my voice is all weird and croaky. I don't know if I'm coming down with a cold, but I thought like after a couple of games I would shake it off, but my voice is just absolutely fucked today, which is perfect for a video we do once a year.
Great.
Yeah, have fun in editing. I think the only like complaint I have about Humanity is there is some annoying chaos theory. Later on in the game, you have a lot of humans, and that's what the game is based on. I'll call them lemmings. And there's so many of them, it becomes like a weird fluid simulation, and they bump into each other with physics. So sometimes your puzzle solution will run different times, depending on like how the guys bump into each other and move and flow. And there's a chaos theory to the physics, which is kind of annoying, where sometimes I would like run my simulation, let's call it, and it wouldn't work, and sometimes I would run the simulation and it would be successful, which I think for a puzzle game is kind of irritating. I remember encountering that in Polybridge, where strangely my bridge would break sometimes and not other times if I changed nothing because of chaos theory and physics simulation.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I really have to say. There are certain chunks of the game which I don't think are as fun in their puzzle theme. Some puzzle chunks are different, and some are more interesting and more exciting than others. And that's all I'm gonna say. If you like puzzles, you should play it.
I still don't know how it escalates, but I wanted to make it clear that Humanity is the biggest honorable mention on my list, and I wish I had seen it all through. And I will get to it at some point, and I liked everything about it. I've liked all the time I put into it. I just don't know when to play it, I think is my problem. I used to have
could be a good Steam Deck game. Always on PlayStation.
Yeah. Well, you can do weird. You can do that in some weird capacity. I used to have slower mornings where I'd poke away at sort of puzzle or 13 Sentinels was a big morning game I remember fondly. And I don't know why, I just wake up and I'm like, I want to get going so that I'm done earlier in the day. But when I'm done work at the end of the day, I don't want to play a puzzle game, Yeah. And so I just haven't found the right brain space for a puzzle game. And that game is actively difficult when you're going for the goldies. It's nasty. So I will beat all of Humanity at some point. And I really look forward to it because I like everything about it, for sure. And it's got this crazy good level builder as well, so the community can just make levels for it as well, which is cool. And I have no idea how it escalates, so I'm fascinated to see where it goes.
Yeah, it follows the themes and journey that Humanity has gone on, and it uses that theming in cool ways.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
If nothing else, look up the ads for this game on YouTube. They are amazing.
It has some very cool boss fights as well that plays with fluid simulation.
Interesting.
With individual humans.
Yeah, I did not see any of that stuff, so.
The last boss fight made my PS5 have frame drops, so.
That's amazing.
It was, yeah, it's cool.
That is fantastic. My number 7 is an old game. DLC for an old game. I would normally put this at the bottom of the list.
Modern Warfare 3?
Yeah, Modern Warfare 3 is number 7. Woohoo! Got him! Take that, Activision. My number 7 is Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Like I said, would normally put this lower, but the other 3 games were sort of unfinished / ongoing experiences. So, yeah, Phantom Liberty is excellent, start to finish. I didn't think I was going to get to it as soon as I did, because I wanted to... My intention originally was to fully replay all of Cyberpunk, right? And we actually chatted about this not too long ago, I think just to each other, that Cyberpunk is very memorable still, and I found that to be the case in replaying. So I started fresh because I wanted to see how the whole experience had changed after 3 years of being updated and all that. And I would say the 15 hours or so that I put into the main original game before being able to access the DLC. It was totally enjoyable and good in the same way Cyberpunk was back then, but I really did recall pretty much all of it very clearly. But then the DLC was... the DLC is easily the best content in the game from start to finish. It's extensive. Like, it was 25 hours or so, probably.
Damn, yeah.
Doing everything. The new zone, Dogtown, is the best area in the game. Visually, without question, of course. They ditched last gen for the DLC, so they're able to do a lot more interesting stuff with their engine. Not just visually, but also like density-wise, and even some of the gameplay. There's the whole opening... The opening 40 minutes of this DLC is better than any COD campaign in the last, 8 years. It's more cinematic and exciting and it's a hell of a start. And it's very action-y. But then the rest of the DLC is actually this really interesting sort of slow, quiet, spycraft DLC. They called it a spy thriller in their marketing, and that's extremely accurate. It's pretty much just a bunch of James Bondy feeling quests in a lot of ways, with lots of this person and this double agents and all the fun things you would want with spy stuff. And yeah, it was just nice to experience Cyberpunk basically the way it was meant to be, I would say. Without all the bullshit from 3 years ago, all the jank, all the bugs, all the sort of scatterbrained ideas. They've really honed it in the DLC into something that's much more, I would say, like a GTA experience, where it's very linear in its mission design and choices and all that, and it's going for a very cinematic experience. But then they let you do a lot of RPG stuff with the skill trees and gameplay and all that. But the main reason it's on here is just because of the story stuff. Like I said at the beginning, there wasn't a lot of story this year that I found interesting. And specifically, the plot of games this year was not what I was interested in. Like the A to B to C, here's what happened in the story. Not much interesting this year. Lots of sort of player stories and things like that. But Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty story is genuinely good from start to finish and is intriguing, and I wanted to see it through. And I have to say, the ending that I went with is one of the better game endings I've seen in a long time, and it in fact ended the whole game. It wasn't just a DLC ending. It's a new ending they added. Sorry, it's a new ending they added with the DLC, but it doesn't just wrap up the DLC. It ends the entire game. And is very different from the other base game endings of Cyberpunk, which I thought were pretty goofy. A surprise. It's weird when a game ends and it's well shot and well timed. It reminded me of The Last of Us's ending in the way that it's timed perfectly and tonally right for that whole experience. It reinvigorated a lot of the sort of CD Projekt Red trust, I would say, because they eroded a lot, and they I would say rebuilt most of it with Phantom Liberty and reminded everyone that they're really good over there at video game writing and world building and art and gameplay. I sort of forgot how fun Cyberpunk is to play. I played as a crazy sword wielding lunatic, which I had not done before, and that's very fun and violent and insane. Cyberpunk's good, Yeah,
I've been thinking about it a lot recently. I'm not sure why.
They just did a great job across the board with all of it. The new characters are really good. The storytelling stuff, especially if you go for the darker choices, are really tonally appropriate also for that whole world. And it was nice to just not feel lost. The fun part of Cyberpunk the first time was, we talked about back then, the sort of the tourist that's just what the fuck is this world? This is insane. But now it's been 3 years. We played all of Cyberpunk. We watched the Edge Runners DLC. We're very familiar with all the words and things in the Cyberpunk world, and it was nice to just sort of feel more like at home in that world and just be able to like experience and appreciate other parts of it instead of sort of being overwhelmed by like the messy systems and also the insane world and all that stuff. It just feels more sort of familiar in a way that lets you appreciate other parts of it more. So
yeah.
Also, man, I played it immediately after Starfield, and holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
Good God.
Well, Starfield's still the last like RPG I played as well, so
Yeah. It feels like 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead of Starfield. It was wild.
Yeah, no shit.
And very refreshing.
Most things feel 15 years ahead of Starfield.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it looks so good. It's unbelievable. The ray tracing shit is so crazy, and it runs so well now. Oh man.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm super, super interested in what they do next with Cyberpunk. I mean, it's going to be 6 or 8 years probably before we see that, but
Probably just a direct sequel, right?
I don't know, because like you can't have the same main character, right? You can't have like everything about the story stuff in Cyberpunk.
In the world.
Yeah, I presume you set another game in Night City, because I think that's like most of the Cyberpunk world is Night City. I don't know, but like mechanically, art design wise, all these things, fascinated, because they're on a really good trajectory right now after Phantom Liberty. So, and they've got a lot of smart people there now.
Yeah.
And they righted their wrongs pretty well, I would say.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to it for sure, because I have not played Cyberpunk since 1.0. So
Yeah.
And 1.0 is a generous thing to call 1.0.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right, this is probably the most, I don't know, maybe the most controversial position I have this year, because it's my biggest guilty pleasure of the entire year, and that is Dead Island 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, people shit all over this game, man.
People are wrong.
I think so. I understand that it is maybe one of the least ambitious sequels of all time. There isn't really much going on in this game except for slaying zombies and slowly getting better at doing that. But I think the position of this game on my list maybe comes back to the TED Talk I did at the beginning, where I'm just looking for gamey-ass games where you're just playing the game. And in Dead Island 2, you just unabashedly walk around and bash enemies. And it's so disgusting and gory and visceral. And it's all you do in the game. And I just had an absolute blast with it from the beginning all the way to the end. And I feel like it was the first game this year which made me realize that I'm losing touch. Not losing touch. I'm moving away from like what people are looking for, because like the lack of complexity was such a contentious like negative for people, and to me it's like a positive. Like this game chose to just do one thing, and it chose to do it well, and it didn't have a complex story, and it didn't have like super cinematic events and all this usual AAA drivel that I don't really give a shit about. It was just fun. And I don't have anything else to say about it. It's a really good zombie killing game. I think the game actually looks surprisingly good, not just the gore stuff. I think it actually looks surprisingly sharp. It's got enough environments to keep me entertained, enough enemy variety and weapon variety to keep it like feeling fresh all the way through. If you like killing zombies, if you like Dead Island 1, or honestly, what's the other one? Oh god, Dying Light.
Dying Light.
If you like anything where like it's about killing zombies, and I've kind of said in the past that these games, this genre is kind of my guilty pleasure. I like Dead Island and Dying Light a lot. I just think it's good. I just think it's a good one. And I don't really understand why people shit on it so much. I guess I just want different things from what the majority of people are looking for nowadays in the big AAA games. I don't know if this counts as AAA, but I think also after the infamous like developer hell this game went through, the fact that it even came out is a miracle, and the fact that like it's fun, I don't know, I just feel like it should be kind of celebrated, but yeah.
I think people foolishly thought that like, oh, it's been in development for 9 years, how could they make something so simple? And it's like, it wasn't in development for I mean, the game that came out was not what they started working on 9 years ago. The game that came out was made in like 2.5 years or whatever. And yeah, they did a fucking great job with it. It's not on my list. It's not in my honorable mentions, but I agree. I think Dead Island is way better than people gave it credit for, and it's completely good at what it set out to do. It had simple ambitions and achieved them perfectly.
I'm a hardcore defender of Dead Island 2. I really shamelessly like this game, and it feels good to kind of put it on my list. Don't be mean to this game, it's fun. The end.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be on your list, and I'm glad, because it's a good game. Like, it's completely solid.
We need more games like this where you're just killing stuff from A to B and that's it.
Yeah.
And honestly, that actually might be a little reductive. This game does have some cool, like, small RPG systems that do kind of change the way you play as you go through. You can really break this game power-wise in a way which I think is really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we did a good chat about it. We didn't do a lot of chats this year. I think that this is the first game we actually covered in a chat.
First tower game, yeah.
The tower game, yeah. The first one. My number 6, I would sum up exactly like what you said, is it was just fun and I just had a fun time with it, and that was Spider-Man 2.
Ooh, okay.
And I'm surprised it's this high because I did not put the first game on my list, and Miles Morales I put, I think, at number 10, mainly just to cover it because we didn't talk about the PS5 launch at all anywhere. So, but this I absolutely enjoyed from start to finish, and I really didn't think I was going to do anything other than the main story, and I ended up doing all the side stuff because it was just fun. And it's super well paced, and the variety is there. And we had, again, we sort of just talked about this, relatively speaking,
with the
tower. Yeah, it was the last game chat we did. I was going to say a few weeks ago, but it was probably a few months ago now, but whatever.
Yeah.
It still feels fresh. Go listen to that if you want more. It's just a fun, super well made AAA video game, and it was a nice sort of it sort of reinvigorated the, like, I was sort of glum about Insomniac being stuck with Marvel, especially after seeing the leaks as well. But even knowing that they were making the Wolverine game, and they're obviously going to make Spider-Man 3, and it's like, okay. But and I just am so tired of Marvel stuff. But they proved that A, they're extremely good at making video games, and B, superhero stuff can be totally fun, you know?
Yeah.
Batman games were great, and this is the best one of those since, well, I guess Arkham Knight or whatever, 9 years ago. Yeah, it was just a good, fun video game time all the way through.
Yeah, we can do a smooth little segue here because it's my number 5, Spider-Man
nice.
2.
Nice.
Yeah, like you said, we did a long chat on it not too long ago. I think the best way to summarize it is I didn't give a shit about this game.
Yeah.
I wasn't excited at all because I was a bit burnt out on the format. What was that line I had at the beginning of our talk? It was like diminishing returns versus Insomniac's creativity.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the too long didn't listen to our tower talk was I definitely felt a little bit of fatigue with the combat loop and some of the movement. I do like the wingsuit. It is a nice mix-up. But it was just like the bombastic nature of the story and how the world and the characters kept evolving in different ways. The really weird things that happened with the Venom playable characters and suit. It just really, really goes for it. And I love it when developers, movie directors, whoever, just fucking go for it.
Yeah.
And even though this game probably is going to be higher for other people, I just respected the game almost more than I enjoyed playing it. I'm also a long-time fan of Insomniac, and it just like warms my dead heart to see them continue to, climb the ladder every single time. They've got to be like AAA-wise now like one of the biggest developers in the entire world. And seeing them come from Ratchet and Clank is just kind of crazy.
Yeah, in terms of frequency and quality, I don't think anyone else has come close, especially this generation. They're like single-handedly carrying the PS5.
That is unbelievable, yeah.
They put out Miles Morales, which is cross-gen, but then Ratchet and Spider-Man 2 are exclusives. They feel exclusives. They feel next gen.
Yeah.
At least visually. And it's only like they did that in 3 years. It's insane.
Yeah. It feels like if the Astrobot guys were the biggest developer in the world in like 2027.
Oh my god, don't tempt me. God, where is the Astro game they've been working on for like 4 years?
Yeah.
Oh god, I hope that's out this fall.
But yeah, Spider-Man 2, I think a quote from our review was, I went in not caring about Spider-Man 2, and I came out excited about Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. That's an accomplishment.
Yeah. Really stupid, fun, silly, schlocky game, and I like all that stuff. They really went for it, and yeah, super fun.
Speaking of fun, silly schlock, the king of schlock is my number 5, and that was Resident Evil 4.
Oh, right.
It was interesting to finally play Resident Evil 4. Again, we covered it on the tower, so there's a good long chat there. I had really no idea why people liked RE4 so much and had no reverence for it. So it was interesting to play it, and I was, for a while, quite a while, sort of put off by the fact that it's, for how I played it, and in my experience, it is an action game 100% with no tension or survival horror elements at all. And once I sort of came to terms with that, it was easy to start to appreciate all the stuff it's good at and just have a fun time with RE4. The combat is really solid. I found it a little simple, but it's okay. It gets by because of its, like, the simplicity almost works in its favor in a sense as it goes on, because you can just sort of start just destroying everything. And it was just fun and dumb, and we like Resident Evil games, despite realizing when we did our top 100 that we had almost no Resident Evil games on any of our top 10 lists for a decade, which I am really making sure to remedy now. So that there was no chance in hell RE4 wasn't going to be on the list. I still cannot believe RE7 was not on either of our lists. That
what
just
the
blows
hell is
my
that
mind.
about?
It's not my favorite Resident Evil game, but as a fun action adventure, it was fantastic. And I more than ever, and this is a trend that sort of continues, I want 15-hour linear action adventure games to come back. I miss them so much.
Yes.
Pacing,
yes.
Like, they're paced well. Resident Evil 4 is paced phenomenally. I think the Separate Ways DLC is better than the base game, and I played that.
I haven't even played that yet.
It's, I played it very recently, and it almost moved the entire game up on my list because it's 3.5 hours, $15, and it is a recap of the entire, like, all the major beats from the 20-hour base game are there, except you do it in 3.5 hours, and, like, the pace is amazing.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great time all the way through. It is not... I like Resident Evil when it's at least trying to be a little bit scary or tense, but they didn't want to do that with RE4, and that's fine. And I respect it also from the sort of like academic side of, people love RE4, the original, and apparently they did a fantastic job and respected the original while remaking this game and, doing their own thing with it. I can't do the compare and contrast because I don't know, but they did a fantastic job with it. And I still want to see Resident Evil pull back on the action because it's that's just what I want from Resident Evil, but they did a good job making a really dumb action game.
Yeah.
RE4 is very silly, and I'm sure we will talk about it again later.
Maybe.
Maybe.
All right. Number 4. This is, for me, the biggest surprise of the year, and I don't think you'll see this one coming. My number 4 is Lies of P.
Wow.
Lies of P.
I knew you'd been playing quite a bit of it, and I suspected it might show up, but I was not thinking number 4. I'm impressed. You don't like Souls knockoffs. What happened? How did this happen? This is wow.
Someone made a really good one.
Wow.
That's
about
what happened.
fucking Pinocchio.
I can't believe it. Like Jamison just said, I don't really care about From Software, knockoffs, spin-offs, different developers trying to do what From Software does. Sometimes I don't even click with what From Software themselves do. I have played all of them. I think Dark Souls 2 is the only one I never finished. And I wouldn't consider myself like a super fan. Again, like I said, I've finished most of them. I played Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 the most, but I pretty much just play their games and move on. And I don't really crave the genre that much. I tried Neo, and I did finish Neo 1. And outside of that, like I tried The Surge, and I was like, nah. And I keep seeing game after game after game come out and try to do what From Software is doing, especially in like the indie AA space. I remember, I always fucking forget it, the anime one where you're like a vampire.
Oh god, I don't know, dude. I don't know.
I forget. I remember Mortal Shell. People were really excited about Mortal Shell. And I look at these games and I scoff. You can't just do what From Software does, you plonkers. It took From Software 10 years to get the balance right. It's like a nuanced little balance, because when you're making a game which is difficult, it's very easy to make a game which is just annoying. There's a very like thin line that you have to tread, and also From Software are just like masters of world design, enemy design, music. So when I saw Liza P, I was like, good fucking luck. You're not gonna make a Bloodborne game, you just can't do it. I don't even know who these people are. They've never made a game before.
No.
So when the game came out, I ignored it completely. I didn't play it. People said it was good, but I just ignored them because From Software people think everything's good, dude. I didn't even think Elden Ring was like the best game they've ever made, and people said it was the best game ever made in the world. Not just what From Software made. So there's like hyperbole and enthusiasm from these From Software fans, which I just ignore. But I went through a big break in video games after Starfield and Alan Wake 2. I hit a wall, and I just like wanted a gamey game with lots of gameplay. Liza P was on Game Pass, and I was like, maybe I haven't been getting enough use out of my subscription to Game Pass this year. Let's at least download this full game and give it a go. And yeah, this is another game that I haven't finished. I looked at like a walkthrough's contents. I feel like that's a good way to like see how long a game is without spoiling it. And it seems like there's 11 areas and I'm on area 9. So I'm getting there. So I don't know if it's going to climb or decline on this list maybe later on. Maybe next year we'll do another recap. But so far, this game is really, really good. And I'm really shocked. And I don't know how they managed to do this. I like this game more than a few of From Software's games. Wow. This is, without a doubt, the best attempt at being a From Software game ever.
Wow.
I know Team Ninja have had success, but I really feel like Neo has done its own thing and kind of created its own identity. But Liza P is unabashedly and like it has no shame about how much it is taking from Software in a way which I think is a little dangerous. It is so close to what From Software makes that I don't know copyright law.
Call the lawyers.
But it's really close. There's like it controls the same. Every mechanic is the same. There's boss souls. Like it has the Sekiro parry stagger. It has Bloodborne rallying. It has the dodging iframes from all the games. It just feels like every From Software game put into one. And that is a really good mix, it turns out. It turns out if you mix Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro all together, it makes for a really, really fun and exciting combat system. The one thing that Liza P does, which is original, is its weapon mix and match system, where every weapon can be snapped in two, where you have the head of the weapon and you have the handle of the weapon. And you can mix the head and handle of every weapon in the game to make like different configurations of things. And every head and handle has its own unique weapon art to say. And that's really fun. It's fun to like rip off the head of an electric weapon and like stick it to a fire axe pole, so it's like this slow, heavy, sparky thing. And there's loads of like crazy interesting weapons, and it's just fun to experiment with them all the way through. Like I kind of mentioned with Remnant 2, I am kind of in that place where I've invested so much upgrade material in like 2 of the weapons I have, that I am kind of stuck with like the 2 or 3 weapons I have at the moment. But still, the weapon system and combat in this game, they're really fucking cool. I think the base melee combat is better than Elden Ring. I really do. There are obvious areas that this game cannot compete against From Software, and that's going to be, you know, budget scale stuff. It's got less areas, the art is not as good, the music isn't as good, the enemy variety isn't as good. But this game has some incredible boss fights with some really like amazing design and animation. And across the whole board, this game just has like more going on than I really expected. It's a long game. I'm like 23 hours in. Wow. I've got like the hardest bosses to go, so it wouldn't surprise me if like the last 3 areas of the game take me like a decent chunk of time, and this takes me like 30 hours to get through. It's a really extensive and impressive offering from someone's first attempt in this genre. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
It's a really, really competent and impressive attempt at what From Software does. And for me, it kind of matches some of the stuff they've done.
Wow.
I think it's below Sekiro. I still think Sekiro is the best in the genre. And obviously Elden Ring is a scale project where you get so much bang for your buck.
And Bloodborne you haven't been able to replay, so it's hard for you to compare, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bloodborne is way more fluid, and the art design of Bloodborne is better. But I don't know, this game can, like, when it comes to, like, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3...
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it would be up to your, like, personal tastes. Like, again, like, if you were doing objective, it would always lose in art design and enemy variety, because you can't go against a mega AAA boy like From with all the practice and the art. But when it comes to playing the game, I think this is better than Dark Souls. I actually do.
Wow.
It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, I'm sort of shocked because I know you're picky and have been completely uninterested in every FromSoft knockoff that's come out. Like, well, maybe with the exception of Neo, but that, like you said, is a fairly different thing at this point.
Yeah, they found their own space with Neo.
Yeah. But all the others, like the Fallen Kings of Lords of the Fallen, you know, those things. Oh yeah,
that's a good example. Lords of the Fallen.
Because that just came out as well, right close to Liza P.
Yeah.
And that's what I presumed Liza P was going to be, where it's like, yeah, it's fine.
There needs to be, like, separate names. Like, Neo is inspired by From Software, but did its own thing. And then you have stuff like The Surge, which is just From Software, but with a different flavor, you know?
Right, yeah.
And that's where Liza P lands. It's just From Software-like, but with its own spin. And no game that has tried that before has been successful for me. And this is, like, just successful.
Yeah,
they did it.
Really
They've never made a game before. I don't know how they did it.
That's crazy.
I would say I do have one major complaint, and I think the parry window is too small in this game. It's quite a large mechanic in the game to perfectly parry an enemy, to bring their stagger down, to do like the big impactful hits. There is dodging, so you don't have to always go for the perfect parry. But it's just like more satisfying, more effective, so it just kind of feels like the game is pushing you to kind of focus on parrying. And it is fucking brutal. Like, you have got to be on it. And every enemy kind of does like the Elden Ring slow wind-up attack, so you have to just learn through memorization of timing. And there's just a lot of times in Liza P where I die, and I feel like I blocked perfectly. Obviously, I didn't, because I got hit. But I'm not a computer. I'm an evolved monkey who's 30 years old. So when my brain thinks I did something perfectly, it probably means it's computed a little too harshly, because I'm not a computer and I'm getting older. So I just feel like if they would open the parry window a little bit, it would have been more satisfying and would have felt less like I'm being cheated, even though I'm not. That's it. That's all I've got. It's also brutally hard at times. Specifically the boss fights, I would say like the A to B between the boss fights where you're just like exploring, looting, and killing ads all feels probably easier than From Software games, but the bosses are fucking ruthless. The last boss I beat took me 5 hours.
Oh god.
Which is the same as Melania from Elden Ring.
Oh my god.
So yeah, and I'm not even like at the
Jesus.
last chunk of bosses yet. They are fucked up.
Wow.
But the game does have a summon, whatever you want to call it,
sure.
summon mechanic, where you can bring in, I think it's called a Spectre. I have not been using that because it's just not how I like to play those games, but it has some like alternatives if you don't fancy the idea of a 5-hour boss fight.
Okay. Yeah.
You can bring in dudes to help you.
Right. Of course you can. It's a FromSoft clone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's, I don't know. It's the most successful From Software clone ever, in my opinion.
Wow.
And it's by someone who's never made games before, a South Korea developer.
Yeah.
I still can't remember what their name is, but wow. Whatever they play next, I will take them very seriously, and shame on me for being so judgmental.
Yeah, I guess so.
I didn't think it was possible to just copy what someone else does, because there's like nuance and tiny little details that make those things work. But they figured it out.
Wow.
I don't know what else to say. They did it. They copied their homework really well.
I know how the game ends, and they set up a sequel. And I would imagine with the success it saw, it'll get that sequel made. So
Yeah.
I'll be super interested to see what they do next and how they step into a little bit more of their own thing instead of just being like so blatantly copying someone else,
Yeah.
Especially early on, like I think you said like the art style does go places, but
It
like all the
does, yeah.
trailers and all their marketing and all the early stuff was just like, remember Bloodborne,
Yeah, a lot of Yarnum.
Yes, or early Yarnum stuff. It just looks so much like that.
It does vary things up a bit more as it goes along.
That's
But
good.
there is still like a lot of like industrial steampunky mixed with Bloodborne stuff.
Right.
But there's some like fantastical stuff along the way as well. Yeah. That game's really sick.
Huh.
That game's really sick, but I haven't beaten it yet. I really wanted to beat it before we did this chat, but it's just long, man. It's long and really difficult.
Yeah, you don't want to force
so-
yourself through it, especially when it's challenging. Yeah.
So we'll see. It might climb the list. I might find the end really annoying. Last boss fights can be, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, biggest surprise of the year for me.
Cool. I am. Yeah. Wow. I'm sort of shocked to hear that.
I know. Don't surprise you.
Number 4? My number 4 is Dead Space.
Nice.
Dead Space is great.
Dead Space is great.
I was surprised. I think what was interesting about revisiting Dead Space is I really realized how much of an impact Dead Space 1 and 2 had on me back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, I was replaying it, and I was remembering a lot. Like, as soon as I'd get to an area, I was like, oh, I remember this. Oh, I remember that. And I went and looked through my achievements and stuff on the Xbox profile, and I was like, no, because I thought I must have replayed Dead Space a bunch to remember it this clearly after, it came out in 2008, so I probably played it in 2010 or whatever, so like 13 years later, I remember it so well. No, I had only played that game once, so it obviously stuck with me. And it was really fun to revisit because, I don't know, this is one of these things where it's just like, I just like, I guess I just like Alien a lot, right?
Yeah.
And Dead Space is basically an Alien game.
Yeah.
And a survival horror action-y thing. And I think, the visual, they did such a good job of visually and audio uplifting it and polishing the whole package up. I had a basically a perfect time playing through the game.
Yes.
Again, 10 to 15 hours. And the reason it's above RE4 is two things. One, because just I think the setting, I just love the setting. I love a creepy, abandoned, gothic spaceship, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I also just find it a little more stressful to play. It is, you know, sort of clunkier and obviously trying to be spookier. I don't think the game is scary at all. Actually, it was kind of fun going through it again and just realizing how jump scare heavy it is and just finding it all sort of endearing in a way. But the general moment-to-moment mood of Dead Space is much more tense than something like Resident Evil. It's atmosphere, and that those things add to the experience and I think put it above Resident Evil for me just because of those two, like the setting and the vibe being a little more stress-inducing, even though it's not really a scary game. And I, you know, I've said it already, and it applies to a lot of things on this list. And this is really the game that made me realize what I had hinted at earlier. A lot of the games remind me of a certain thing, and that is like the 360 era, right? The 360 era is sort of present in spirit in a lot of ways throughout most of the games on this list in various capacities. Like Spider-Man reminds me of the Batman games, right? Resident Evil, Dead Space, obviously are from that era specifically, but just like linear, well-paced, lots of action, not much cutscenes, good visuals, and after 15 hours it ends. And you have just this great fun roller coaster experience.
Yes.
And Dead Space was that, and it's on my Dead Space is definitely on that like sort of short list of I will replay this regularly because it's just ticking all the boxes for me, like setting, visuals, performance of the PC port, and it feels good. They made smart little changes. They brought some of the like Dead Space 2 and 3 design things backwards, like with the I don't remember. There was some major gameplay system that was in 2 that you thought was in 1, but it wasn't in 1. So
picking up limbs and chucking them back.
And picking up and launching limbs, And they sort of revamped the alt fire on some of the weapons in interesting ways.
I think the alt fire might be completely new. I don't know if there was alt fire.
Yeah, you might be right. I think there was alt fire, but I don't remember. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the remake is there's sort of two approaches, right? There's the RE4 approach of like, we're making a radically different game.
Like a remix.
Yeah, and then there's the Dead Space approach of it's more or less identical, but they've done these small changes to it, and they're the sort of small changes that I can't remember how it originally was. I just presume, like if you told me the remake is 1-to-1 identical except they made the graphics better, I would have believed it because it's just how I remember Dead Space 1, because 2 and 3 also sort of have merged with it. Over time in my brain, but it's not, and it does make you realize when you go back and look at Dead Space 1, like, oh, they actually made a lot of really small but really smart changes to make the game feel more modern and fresh. And I loved it all the way through, and I will always love this sort of genre, basically. And preach. I didn't realize it'll come up again, but this sort of that era of post-Halo and COD, like 2008 to 2011 games that I played on the 360 are like some of the only things in existence I have any nostalgia for, basically, is what I'm learning about myself. And I desperately hope they do this for this style and quality of remake for Dead Space 2, because Dead Space 2 is a better action-adventure game than most things out there still. It's much less of a horror thing and a little more action, but man, Dead Space 2 is a wild ride, and I have to imagine they will, because I can't imagine. I think this did fairly well, and I remember there being surveys that went out being like, would you be interested in this for Dead Space 2? And everyone was like, yes, please, God. And it's just, EA doesn't have a lot of goodwill wins that it gets, so I think it would be smart for them to keep the Dead Space brand sort of fresh, because I would love to see this for Dead Space 2. Dead Space 3, we can leave that one behind.
Would be interesting to see it like modernized and cleaned up, though.
Yeah, a remixed, like Dead Space 3, but getting the Resident Evil 4 type of more radical rethink treatment could be really interesting. Or just make a brand new Dead Space, make something, do 1 and 2, and then be like, okay, we're going to make a new game from scratch now.
I don't know why they don't. It's a big time for survival horror.
It is, yeah. It's been nice to see survival horror come back to life, and without Resident Evil, we wouldn't have... Without the Resident Evil remakes, we definitely wouldn't have seen a Dead Space remake, because it was never super successful back then. It was always fairly niche, relatively speaking. But man, Dead Space rules. And it was amazing to play it like 3 months after the Callisto Protocol and realize just like how bad Callisto Protocol was at emulating Dead Space, and how many little things Dead Space does so well, from like the UI to the like horrible like every time you like punch anything, like all the sound and art, and they just nailed it so well.
Maybe Callisto Protocol was also a reason that I was skeptical about Liza P.
Yeah.
Just more and more, it's like you can't copy what someone else is doing. You just can't do it. You don't get it.
Yeah.
Some people get it, apparently. Callisto Protocol didn't.
No, they definitely didn't. Yeah. But yeah, Dead Space makes me happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. We're getting into the top 3.
The top 3.
This is where it gets interesting, because I think you know what I have left, and I know what you have left.
Yes.
So yeah.
Just a matter of order.
So deduction starts to come in.
I'm blanking on 1 or 2, maybe? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Really?
For you. Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking things, and there are 3. Anyways, go ahead.
Now, this is going to reveal a lot, I would say. My number 3 is Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Now we're getting somewhere. We did a long chat about Tears of the Kingdom. It was a good chat, actually. Probably one of my favorite chats for the Tower of the Year.
Yeah.
For me, this is like the most creative game of the year. And if we did like proper award shows, Jeff Keighley style, if there was like game design, this is the best game of the year for me. Obviously, I haven't played Baldur's Gate, but I would say the first 20 hours of Tears of the Kingdom was like the best 20 hours of any game I've played maybe ever. The layers of discovery in that game are like unparalleled. Up there with like Outer Wilds for me. When you first discover the depths and all the crazy toolkit that this game has. And then like fiddling around with Ultra Hand, and when you finally get the way to print blueprints, and reversing time, and attaching shit to arrows, and how all these things just work on a Nintendo Switch. That honeymoon period of Tears of the Kingdom was just like a mind-blowing couple of weeks, and I don't know if a game's gonna ever be able to beat that kind of like revelatory period of when everyone first was seeing what this game could do. And like the Twitter clips of people breaking the game in different ways. It was just an amazing like zeitgeist with this game. For me, the second half doesn't quite stick the landing as much. I feel like the formula and the format sticks so closely to Breath of the Wild that I kind of was like knowing what to expect from the routine and the formula. I thought like the castle was a little bit disappointing, and for me, melee combat still sucks ass in this game. And I just like never want anything to do with it. And I still think the dungeons are just like not as good as like the old style format from like Twilight Princess and before that. But yeah, you just can't take away from the ridiculous toolkit that this game did in an open world game. I don't know if there will ever be a game which has more versatility and experimentation in an open world which doesn't explode. It's just an absolutely unparalleled achievement, and in the long run, the game, it landed well with me, but there's a lot of things about it which maybe didn't work for me compared to other people. The depths especially I found a bit boring and repetitive. It would maybe be higher off my list if certain things matched what I don't know, I just liked certain elements of it more. But this is probably my most commended game of the year from a design perspective. It's just a ridiculous achievement, and the fact that the Switch doesn't set on fire is a fucking miracle.
It's crazy, yeah.
But yeah, we did a really long chat. We went into detail on all the different assets and aspects of the game. if you want a more detailed chat. I'm sure it's going to come up pretty soon.
Yeah.
An incredible achievement, but for me, just lacking in a few areas, which maybe would have pushed it a bit higher on the list.
Fair. My number 3, it is Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And some people are going to be like, oh my god, it's not his number 1. Oh my god, terrible fail.
It's pretty high.
I don't care.
I feel like some people could say it about tiers, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. That was the fun thing about the year. You know, there's like a handful of games. There felt like there was a little bit of actual competition for like the number 1.
Yeah.
Which was cool. And anyways, we'll get there. Baldur's Gate 3 is, I mean, there's what I don't know, like what needs to be said about it after all this time. Like it's I feel like everyone knows, you know, at this point. A reason, just to get some negative thoughts out of the way quickly, it's not any higher, and for a while it was lower by a couple spots, because I found almost the first 40 hours to be very frustrating and difficult to enjoy. That's not to say it was all bad for 40 hours. I would not have stuck with it if there wasn't lots of stuff in there that I was still enjoying, but the game is exceptionally difficult to really understand, and I found it very frustrating and confusing because I played Divinity. Like I played 75 hours of Divinity Original Sin 2. You know, I'm familiar with their games, and yet there are so many systems and mechanics and clunky interactions that are not explained at all. Like they don't even explain how to like go to camp or what a long rest is, basically. Like, and I still don't really know what, or I guess I understand what like all the dice roll stuff is, but I really never thought about it or understood it like in I'm going to examine things and think about like, this guy is probably going to get a higher dice roll. Like all that stuff is so beyond me, because I have never played or seen a single second of D&D in my life. And so all those mechanics are beyond me. And like we said in the podcast chat, we had a good chat about it on the last episode. They put a 3 on it, right? They called it Baldur's Gate 3, and it had been 20 years since Baldur's Gate 2 came out, so they weren't fucking around, right? And that's fine. But it was very difficult to enjoy for the first 30 hours, and that is the main reason it is held back, because the things it's good at really are crazy. The game is insane. Like it's made by crazy people, I think, in the best possible way, and I mean that as the biggest compliment. Like the fact that they made something so sprawling and so flexible and so reactive and so full of like thoughtful, not just gameplay reactions, but story and like written word reactions is remarkable. And I think we've talked about this a few times in the Discord, is that the term role-playing game has really been bastardized over the last 15 years by the AAA industry, to the point where anything that has a skill tree is immediately an RPG. Like, Horizon Zero Dawn is an RPG, and it's like, no, it's fucking not. It has a skill tree. You know, there's no role-playing. You're just filling out a skill tree. Even something like Cyberpunk, you know, okay, yeah, you can pick. That's a little more like, okay, I want to play with a sword or pistols or shotguns or something. But to really embody role-playing is to do what it says, which is to create a role and be able to play it. And the reason we've got away from it is because it's incredibly hard to do that, and it's expensive, and it takes, as we see in Baldur's Gate, 2,000 people, approximately 6 years with a blank check budget to make something viable nowadays. So it was the perfect storm of really, I don't think we'll ever see anything like it again, because of that perfect storm of it was the right people at the right time. They got extensive amount of early access and probably were able to ship it way later than they originally planned because of the COVID delays and interruptions. And I have to imagine a completely blank check from whoever owns D&D. It's a remarkable achievement, and it's like, I love the writing in it. The writing is hilarious and probably the biggest thing I like about it is the writing, because it really evokes the writing style of something like the Mass Effect games, like Mass Effect 2, where there's a certain sort of edge, a sort of meanness to it in a way that's really funny, and that persists all the way through. There's just a charmed sort of like, yeah, you are a fucking weirdo how you're playing this game, aren't you? We know, we see, and we've written stuff for you, you fucker. And that persists all the way through. It's less a game about the story and the characters, even though this game has a lot of people really in love with the characters. I think they're all fine, but it's not, I don't think about them in the way I would think about like the Mass Effect characters, because it's much more my character and my experience and interaction with the systems and the story that is interesting. And it was very refreshing to play basically the Chaos character from my first playthrough. Like, I set out, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play a degenerate lunatic that is gonna try and fuck with the systems as much as possible, and at no point did it ever feel like things were going wrong in the sense of like, oh shit, they didn't think of that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to play and start talking to other people and compare notes, because that's when you really start to realize how different the experience can get. Like my playthrough feels like the playthrough, right? And then I go and talk to Andy and Dawson, and they're like, "What happened here? What happened when you guys lifted this curse? Because I had everyone in this inn got murdered, and they're all dead now." And then Dawson and Andy are like, "Those are some of the most important characters in the entire chapter." And what do you mean they're all dead? I'm like, yeah, they died an hour into the chapter, and they have no idea how the game can function without those characters. And then I'm playing it thinking, this is the only way for that to happen. How else would it go? So once you really start to see other people's playthroughs, and I put like 5 hours into a new character after beating it, and it was really interesting to see just how completely different the experience is. Yeah, it's a wild thing, and I also wanted to give a special shout out to my time with it over Christmas break. The stars aligned such that I had a Christmas break that was basically like being in high school again. I had no social events, I had no work, we didn't do anything exciting for Christmas, and I was able to just sort of like sleep in, stay in my pajamas, play 9 hours of Baldur's Gate 3, do whatever the fuck I wanted after that, and then go to bed. And I did that for like 3 or 4 days before I got like physically tired of doing it, because I'm old.
Yeah.
But it was I haven't done that with a game in probably since Skyrim, honestly, or maybe The Witcher 3, you know. But so it's sort of a perfect storm of being able to churn through it in a short period of time. I did not think I was going to beat it anytime soon, because I started it in September, and at the beginning, or at Christmas, so 3 months later, I was only like 60 hours into the game, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be another 2 months to get through the last 40 hours, and then I did that in about a week. So it was fun to do that as well. Yeah, it's a wild thing. It is a wild game, and I love to see the success they've had, because they really were very niche for so long, and even Divinity, like, I felt like I was one of the only people that played that game, at least among us, and then you guys would come to it a little while later. To see something so hardcore and old school win, like, at the Keighley Festival, you know, like, and have that sort of mainstream success is really encouraging. Mm-hmm. And I would say that about all of my top 3 games. There's a certain level of, like, mainstream acceptance that is really exciting and makes me hopeful about the future of games, that they're not all just going to be like Spider-Man 2s, and that's not to take away from Spider-Man 2, but you know what I mean, like the certain polished, accessible, familiar experience. Baldur's Gate 3's rough edges are indicative of it being made for weirdos, and that it succeeded the way it has is really really amazing. So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is great once you play 40 hours of it and get over all of its frustrations.
I'll get to it maybe one day. I'd like to. I really would.
There's a lot of fun stuff in there.
All right. 2 left. There's a real theme going forward for me.
Yeah.
My number 2, you've already talked about, and you did a good job summarizing it. It is Dead Space, the remake.
Wow. Okay.
My number 2. And the reason is simple, man. Like you said, it's just, I had a perfect time with my 1 and 2 games. A perfect time. And yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is way more impressive from a technical standpoint and design perspective than a remake of Dead Space. But I just love playing Dead Space from the beginning to the end. It's just a flawless experience. And the remake, like you said, it's like a subtle, small remake. It's a massive evolution when it comes to the graphics. It does a small little things to make the gameplay more modernized. So it's kind of nice to play a game which isn't heavily remixed, because Dead Space, the remake, really feels like it's just Dead Space that is that good all these years later. But certain other remixes and remakes have kind of changed the pace and the flavor of the game, which I understand. And I think some people even complained about Dead Space being so similar, but it's just that fucking good. Like, Dead Space is just that good that it's one of the best games I played in 2023, and all they did is make it look super sharp and add in some gameplay renovations, like some boot polish, and that's it. And it's one of the best games I've played in years. And I just found it almost like weirdly endearing in that way, to be like, oh yeah, it's not just like nostalgia, it's not just my memory revering. Rose tinted glasses is another way to put it. Dead Space really is just incredible. I think it's the best survival horror game in terms of location and tone and atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the best, and like you said, I really, really hope that there is a remake for Dead Space 2. With EA, you never know.
Yeah.
And if this is all we get, then it was still like a glorious thing to get. And yeah, it's just really nice to see that Dead Space is good all these years later, and that just a pure survival horror action game is still fucking amazing.
Yes.
I don't know why they went away. It's nice to see them coming back, but I just think it's one of the best genres and formats ever. And in a world full of Starfields and these long 80-hour games and Final Fantasies and Diablos, it's just like nice, like you said, to play like a 10-15 hour game which is incredible from start to finish, and then the credits roll.
Yeah.
God, that game's good.
We never really talked about Dead Space anywhere until now, so it's might come as a bit of a surprise to people if you listen to everything we talk about. But
yeah,
and I'm surprised maybe a little bit that it's number 2, that it's higher than me than it was on my list. But I also I just sort of like you said about Tears of the Kingdom. There's a certain sort of respect for like the 3 games I put above Dead Space that I couldn't.
This is more about my 2023 mood,
Yeah. Dead Space represents what I want. That's my mood, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
If there was one of these out every month, I would be a happy boy.
I'm making a statement.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
This is what I want.
I know what. Yeah.
I love Tears of the Kingdom, but there are parts of that game which are exactly the opposite of how I want things to move forward.
For sure.
Tears of the Kingdom really has a little bit of more is better in certain regards. Still a really high quality product, which, yeah, I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. My number 2 is Tears of the Kingdom.
No.
Tears of the Kingdom is the best game of the year. But I like one other game more for very specific reasons that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But I think, sort of you said, if we were to pull knives out and say, okay, we have to agree on a number 1 game for our list, right?
Yeah.
I would say it's Tears of the Kingdom, and I would fight tooth and nail for it. I don't think it would be too... Exactly. It's top of the tower. So we basically have already declared it the best game of the year. It is a staggering achievement in game design, and I have no idea how it exists on any console. If this came out on the PS5, it would blow my mind. The fact that it exists on the little Switch is a whole other thing. but when it comes to just interesting mechanics and interactions in a world that is really pleasant to just exist in, there's never been anything quite like it, except for Breath of the Wild, of course. But Breath of the Wild, I really liked a lot of Breath of the Wild, especially with its tone, like the music, the art, the personality of the writing, and all these things. I really liked all that stuff, but the mechanics, like we discussed when we talked about the tiers earlier last year on the tower, the mechanics of Breath of the Wild, while interesting, they just didn't do much for me in the long term. They didn't spur my creativity from gameplay. Whereas in tiers, each of the 3 or 4 main mechanics are all individually fascinating, and when you combine them all, it's just wild.
Yeah.
I really do want to make clear that this is probably the first year we've ever done this where I have been a little unsure of what the number 1 was. Normally it's very easy. It's like, it's that game is number 1, no problem. But this year I really would like to ideally they would both be number 1. They're sort of both number 1 in my heart for very different reasons. Like Tears of the Kingdom is the best game of the year for me, and I really sort of tapped into like a childlike sort of wonder in a way that I haven't had a game do in a very, very long time. In a way that I think only Nintendo can do as well. It sort of makes me understand a lot about like the whole of why people love Nintendo so much. For maybe the first time where I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. And it also, they basically made a sequel to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, except 4,000 million times bigger. And that's insane. I really do love Tears of the Kingdom, and it is a game that I will replay at some point because the systems encourage so much interesting exploration from your brain, basically.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite thing was just making the weird dumb Mad Max video that no one watched, because it just made me make weird dumb vehicles. And the game just works. It just lets you do all these things. It's I don't know. There's a lot you can say about it, and I think we said a lot about it. On the Tower chat. It's the best game. It's the best made game since Outer Wilds, I would say, and it's probably on the short list of like the top 5 best made games I probably ever played. Just like thinking objectively.
Yeah,
like if I were to start to really argue with people about what I think is objectively, an extraordinary game, it's Tears of the Kingdom. So I have a tough go of it to explain why my number 1 is my number 1 after saying all that, but I'll get there, and I know how I'm getting there. So it's Tears of the Kingdom is amazing, and it made me happy in a way not a lot of games have before. So good job, Nintendo.
All right, on to my number 1 of the year. Yeah. I feel like it's a really good game, but I feel like 2023 didn't leave me in a place where I get to kick down the door and be like, hooray, it's this game.
Right.
Quite like maybe 2022 did with the surprise of Vampire Survivors. But my number 1 is Resident Evil 4, the remake from this year, which I thought was absolutely fucking amazing. The most amazing thing about Resident Evil 4 is that they decided to remake it in the first place.
Yeah.
I think after the, not disaster of Resident Evil 3, but the kind of underwhelming performance of the game, the length and the commitment to that game, When they said they were going to do RE4, which is probably the most revered survival horror game of all time, I just don't know that anyone thought they could pull it off. And they did, and it was better than the original and remixed in a way which was like super impressive, creative, and bold. Like we were saying with Dead Space, I do like that there's like different approaches. You have like the Final Fantasy VII remix shift approach, and you have the more respectful one-to-one Dead Space, Demon Souls type thing. And I think Resident Evil 4 is maybe the best like remix that's ever been done. It feels like super new and fresh, but also respectful at the same time. There is so much content here, and I just think the combat is fucking awesome. I don't know why. I just think it's just like surprisingly like dynamic and interesting for a Resident Evil game. It also has some of like the greatest enemy design of the entire year. I think the regenerator sequence is my favorite single sequence of the entire year, like one chunk of a game. I don't think I've been more like giddy, and like you shouldn't be really giggling when playing a horrific, horrifying like horror moment. But seeing those guys like wriggle and like slosh around like horrible bags of liquid as you have to like snipe their internal organs with like an infrared scope is just an amazing sequence. And even though you said like this game is definitely action heavy and not really tense, it just has a lot of like good, like difficult set pieces and stressful set pieces in a way which I just really, really enjoyed. The variety in this game is ridiculous. It's just so bombastic and ridiculous. It's just nuts. This game is absolutely nuts, and I do think that Resident Evil 4 just came back and took the crown again, which is like it's just ridiculous, man. Who does that?
Yeah, they're crazy.
Like, people thought it was like the best game in this genre ever. They remade it, and I just think it kind of came and took the crown yet again.
Yeah.
It's just an incredible accomplishment, and one of the best survival horrors, if not the best survival horror game I think I've ever played.
It was the one game that I would have guessed to be your number one.
Yeah, and like I said with Dead Space, I'm kind of going in circles here, but I just had a perfect time. I can't think of a portion of RE4 where I was like frustrated or annoyed. I was just giggling like a sick child who gets excited about gross horror moments for the whole thing and just having a blast. I played it on hardcore, which had some moments of stress, the beginning cabin, some of the town moments, like I said, the regenerators. The hard mode on PC had like a really good pace to it, which kept it like a little bit stressful, still not scary, but it had a bit more demand going on in the gameplay section.
I do wish I had played it on hard, because you can't change. It's so weird that you can't change difficulty in that game once you've started.
Probably because of resources or something.
I think so, yeah. I think it's all really tightly tuned. So I get it, but man, yeah, I know. I learned my lesson more than once this year. I played Dead Space on the hard mode, and it was nice. It was still actually too easy, Dead Space on the PC, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But I know going forward, if I'm playing any sort of survival horror on the PC, I have to set it to hard, because then it'll be about the normal difficulty, basically, that you'd get with a controller.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
my 1 and 2 of 2023 were remakes of old survival horror games, so...
Yeah, well,
Don't know what that says about where I'm at with AAA gaming, modern AAA gaming, but,
Yeah. I mean, you taste change, and you get tired of big things, and that's fine. Like, those games were fantastic, and I agree wholeheartedly that I want more like them.
Yeah.
Remakes or original titles. Like, I'm even though Tears and Baldur's Gate are super high on my list, like, they're fucking exhausting. They're so huge. There were 100 hours. I played 2 100-hour games this year, and it was... Like, I see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth they're like, you can spend up to 100 hours in this game. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I look forward to playing that game, but I don't want it to be 100 hours.
Yeah.
Spider-Man was nice because it was 25 hours to do everything, Yeah. Shorter games are better.
I think like 15 consistently good hours is going to be more I'm going to remember that stronger than 100 hours, which had like a bunch of good stuff along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, more games, please, like that. Please,
yes.
God, please.
Yes, please.
But apparently everyone that isn't us wants 100-hour open world RPGs. So
yeah, I know.
I mean, this was definitely the year where we deviated a lot from the mainstream and from each other, which and we did that as well last year. Our number ones were radically different from each other, and they're radically different this year as well. And I enjoy that.
Sure, yeah.
It prompts discussion and curiosity, and everyone's different, and everyone likes different things. My number one is Alan Wake 2. I said I had to justify like Alan Wake being number one, and it was it might take a few words to get there, but I do know why it is number one, because I really did have to think for a while, because I was like, man, Tears of the Kingdom, I adore this game, but my brain just keeps going back to Alan Wake 2. Why do I like it so much? And I've been one to not be super concerned by gameplay, and that would apply here as well. I think all the gameplay parts of it are fine. They work for me. They worked. They did the job. But the stuff that makes Alan Wake 2 stand out to me is the all the other things in it that are hard to fully quantify. But for example, let's say right from the get-go, I was like, you crawl out of a lake as a fat, hairy, bald, naked dude.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this game's for me.
That's like a great opening.
It's an incredible opening, and then the title card hits with the big, loud, bold, brah, 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 and you're like, okay, yeah, this game is probably going to be made for me. And that is ultimately why Alan Wake 2 is number one for me, is because it feels profoundly and explicitly made for my brain in a way that I haven't actually really had from maybe any game ever before to this extent. Alan Wake 1 was one of those sort of important early games like Dead Space, like we talked about, where I found it really fascinating at the time. I was a child still, I don't know, 15, 16 when Alan Wake came out. And I fondly remember discussing it with people in the cafeteria back in the day, being like, what the fuck happened in this story? I have no goddamn idea, but I enjoyed it. And so I realized an interesting thing about Alan Wake is that it sort of is like the culmination of like growing into taste in media, if that makes sense. One of the only things I actually have enjoyed about getting older is developing a sense of what I like, I think one of the best things about getting a taste in media is to understand what it means to have something made that makes you feel seen, basically, where you're like, my brain, my sensibilities, my eccentricities are all being pleased by this entertainment. And when I played Alan Wake 1 at the time, I didn't realize why it was pleasing my brain. And then over the few years after Alan Wake, I'd like learned, that, I love like the David Lynch style of things like that. And then you go back to Alan Wake 1 and you're like, this game is one of those things. And Alan Wake 2, Alan Wake 2 felt like playing a dream that someone made for me. And I don't know, I have actually written a lot down here, but it's struggling to put it into a coherent thought. But if I was more capable and confident and able to make a piece of entertainment with no strings attached, I would want to be able to make something like Alan Wake 2, in the sense of its confidence, in the sense of its shamelessness with which it loves other things, in the confidence it has to be itself, I would say. That's what makes it stand out the most. And I love pretty much every second of the game from start to finish. because of all of the weird blurriness of what Alan Wake 2 is fascinates me. I love this weird blurred line between reality and fiction. I love the blurred line between game and movie. And they just run with all that stuff in a way nothing I've ever played has done that before. Control dabbled in it. You know, they've been dabbling with this for years. Since Max Payne apparently, but I've never played Max Payne, so I can't speak to it. But since Alan Wake, for sure. They have achieved it wholly here with Alan Wake 2 in making just a very strange piece of art that is not. It's like sometimes a game, it's sometimes a movie, it's like a Kojima project but realized properly and before Kojima makes his weird movie game thing in 15 years or whatever that fucking PS5 announcement was. And that it's all of those things that I find so fascinating about Alan Wake. It's the fact that Sam Lake is in that game in like 4 different levels of existence that I find, like the fact that he is there as the guy that created the characters, playing a character that he created, or he's playing a character that he wrote another character to create. And he's doing it both in live action and non-live action, and with someone else's voice and also his voice. And I know that just sounds like a bunch of bullshit, but I just feel and understand that, like, his goal with all of that in a way that I can't really express properly. The whole game is, I don't necessarily understand it literally and can't really express literally why I love it, but I understand it all emotionally in a way that's I've not had with a game before. So, yeah. I also think they just achieved like all the goals they've been chasing for years with it. And I think as an experience, it's completely different from anything I've seen in a game before. And I'm glad we have games like it getting made. I, of course, think games should have lots of interesting gameplay and want developers to pursue gameplay more than story stuff, but I also think games should be able to be art and be fucking weird and messy and be whatever they want to be, and Alan Wake 2 is whatever the fuck it wanted to be, and they just did it. And that's why I like it the most. When I see an artist making fucking weird bullshit like Alan Wake 2, it makes me happy. I found it oddly emotional to see Sam Lake on the stage at the Game Awards doing the dumb Herald of Darkness song because he was so happy. It was a face of like 20 years of grinding to achieve the dream, and that's what Alan Wake feels like in a lot of ways. It's just like there are still people out there that are able to be successful and express themselves and be weird and find some sort of mainstream success through that. And that makes me... I just found it very encouraging, the whole experience. It was like, not all hope is lost for basically games as art form and not as product, I would say. So... Yeah,
I think I can latch on to that specific point as well. I feel like Remedy and Kojima are like the only two people / companies that are doing this sort of like super interesting, not specifically dreamlike, just creative weird shit in video games.
Yeah.
But I just feel like Death Stranding is also a culprit. Why can't it be done with gameplay as well in a fun way? You know?
Yeah, and that's where like we will disagree, because I found the game completely engaging as a survival horror experience. It's not particularly stressful, but much like I was saying with, I mean, Dead Space plays better, of course, but Dead Space as at least trying to be some sort of stressful thing.
Yeah.
And I felt that way with Alan Wake 2. And I also have realized over the last year or so that when it comes to a survival horror experience, I actually, and this sounds really stupid, and I think it's a stupid thing to say, but I like when they don't play as well. I think RE7 is the best playing RE7 because it kind of plays and feels like shit. Because I want to be fumbling with things. I just find it like it escalates the tension, and I know that sounds like video games should play great. Don't listen to me, But like every time we talk about Resident Evil, I'm probably still gonna complain. I'm like, it just feels a little too good to play. But yeah, I know we obviously like have diverged radically with how we feel about like the gameplay side of it. I found it completely engaging, and it did everything it needed to do for me from a gameplay perspective, and I completely understand not feeling that way because it is simple and it is bare bones, in the way it reminds me of RE7, where you're like, RE7 has like 2 enemies and they're not interesting to fight, and that was more acceptable because it was the first one of those in a long time, and that was like 8 years ago, and I agree, they could have made a better playing game, and they have made better playing games with Control. Control is a massively better playing video game.
Yes.
But it is also much more concerned with being a video game, whereas Alan Wake 2, the video game parts of Alan Wake 2 are, yeah, they're like part of the whole. They're not the focus. And I think that was okay. That was okay for me because it worked and it added to the sort of general blurriness of what Alan Wake 2 is. It is a fascinating, bizarre video game.
I think there's one scene in Alan Wake which maybe gives me hope a little bit, which is obviously like the musical number in Alan Wake 2, because it takes like the oddities of the game and it actually has you playing the game and fighting while it's happening in the background. And then, we had the Death Stranding 2 trailer, and like the trailers are amazing, but it's just all cutscenes.
Yeah.
And a lot of like Alan Wake, like the best stuff in Alan Wake 2 for me, except for the dance number, was just like watching the cutscenes.
Yeah.
And it's just like, can't we bring it together? Can't cool stuff happen in these weird studio games while the game is being played? Like the Ashtray Maze and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I want. But these are the only 2 people doing this shit at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't disagree as well, but I think they do. I think they do like a lot of really interesting stuff visually while playing the game, like when they're overlapping, like visuals and stuff. And they were playing with that in Control, but all the things that they were experimenting with in Control have been implemented so much better here when it comes to like live action and cutscenes and mixing them all together. Control is a better game. Unquestionably, absolutely. But for me, always like the coolest parts of Control were the weird FMV sequences overlaid on things. It was the weird story and universe they're weaving together. And all that stuff is just completely unhinged in Alan Wake 2, but in a way that I just find completely coherent. And it made me happy in a way that I really don't get from much entertainment anywhere. So I have not stopped thinking about Alan Wake 2 since beating it, much like a good like David Lynch thing, or like Twin Peaks The Return. It's like I think about that all the time, and I couldn't necessarily tell you why, because a lot of that was a pain in the ass to watch. But it is a fascinating thing, and Alan Wake 2 is so much one of those things to me. So
I'm glad people liked it, because obviously I want Remedy to keep doing their thing.
Yeah, I think it's. The last thing is that I think that game is like the game. It's so interesting how the game itself is about like dreams and art coming to reality and being more than what it set out to be. And it's fascinating that Alan Wake 2 itself is that as well. That it 13 years after the first game, they've been trying to make it for all this time, and they finally were able to do it, and it's so unhinged in the most fascinating way. And the fact that like fucking Fortnite funded it, like created it,
Yeah.
Like, Epic funded it with a blank check because basically of Fortnite money. It's such a wild journey they've been on to make it. And I just am glad they finally did it, and that they are also content with what they made. I want more artists to be able to be fucking weirdos in video games, and
yeah, me too.
I cannot wait to see what they do with Control 2, because that will be a game that's much more a video game, but then they will have also learned all of their stylistic things from Alan Wake 2.
Yeah.
That's like a potential mind-boggling experience, I would imagine, because you will have theoretically improved gameplay and Remedy doing whatever they're doing. So, yeah. Alan Wake 2 just makes me happy, and I can't fully express it. So, there you go.
All right. We'll get back to Alan Wake 2 at a later point. That would be a good chat when Ben's there. I guess the only thing left is honorable mentions. Alan Wake 2 is on my honorable mentions just because that game has some individual moments. You've already talked about it. But like, no one else in the industry is having fun with video games like that. Obviously, the gameplay just didn't work for me in that game, but it still made me smile at certain points. Also, it looks incredible. I really like how that game looks.
It's insane.
I don't know. I feel like I owe Final Fantasy 16 a bit of a shout out just for some of those mega boss fights.
Yeah.
And then I also just have Party Animals and Lethal Company marked down together. It's like the weird co-op shenanigan portion, which we had some fun with this year, but I mean, we played both of them like twice, and just, I don't know, it's not going to go above Remnant 2 for me. But yeah, it's nice to see some like fun party co-op games come back.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That's kind of all I've got.
Final Fantasy 16 was like, I really thought when I finished it, I'm like, yeah, that'll be on my top 10 list, but I just haven't thought about that game for like a second. Yeah, so I enjoyed it, but yeah, we did a good chat on that game, and I really thought it was going to make it the list, but it did not, so I think Rebirth is definitely going to tick more of what I was looking for from Final Fantasy, because 16 just came and went really quickly. Humanity, like I said, also on the indie list, Chance of Sonar. I'm not sure how exactly to say that, but I just think that's a really fascinating game. The fact that they're able to... I was not able to stick with it past a certain point. Again, can't fully tell you why, but the fact that they're able to make a game about learning language is really cool. Really interesting game.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't able to stick with it for whatever reason. Another one I would give a quick shout out to, because I'm still playing it and will continue to play it, is that game I mentioned on the podcast, Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible name, but it's a really neat game, and I just wanted to give it like a little spotlight in this video more than anything. Super well made, great art, great personality, across the board, really good. Almost would have put it above Hi-Fi Rush, or in place of Hi-Fi Rush, but I'm still playing it and I've only played like 6 hours of it or something, so I need to play more of it. Two more quick ones. I really liked about half of Atomic Heart.
Oh yeah.
I did beat that game, and I thought the first like 2 or 3 sessions of it, spanning about half the game, were really impressive. Like the art, the sound, the combat was solid. It was fucking weird.
Yeah.
But then it just really dropped off in the second half and became very boring and repetitive, and the art didn't deliver in the second half. I think they sort of front loaded it with all the amazing art, and the second half is a lot of just sort of corridors, which is a shame, because they were doing some pretty wild stuff with the art in the first half of that game. And a BioShock-ish game is always welcome. And then the last one, I did want to give it a quick shout out, because I just finished it and I just played it in the last week, was Armored Core 6.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to quickly talk about it. Like, I don't necessarily, this might like piss some people off, but I just don't really think Armored Core 6 is actually that great of a game, but it was...
me neither.
But it was like really, it is like extremely bizarre that it exists and is what it is. And again, there's a 6 on it, so like they were sort of making it clear. But I found it very enjoyable and relaxing to play for most of it. And it's like completely brain dead easy, except for 2 boss fights. But yeah, it was fun. And in a week, I'll probably have completely forgotten I ever played it. But I enjoyed the out of time nature of it. It feels like it got teleported forward from 2002. Yeah, weird game.
Yeah, it was weird.
It's a weird thing, and I don't think it's super great in a lot of design ways, I would say. But I was pleasantly surprised at how comfy it was for 3 nights. 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night, with a podcast on or a video on the side. I was like, I'm just shooting big robots with a big robot and not really thinking about anything, and that was okay. So
I will also give a very quick shout out to Dredge.
Oh yeah, Dredge.
Yeah, that was an interesting little indie thing. I didn't play a lot of indie things, and it had a cool tone, and just the general concept of it being like a horror-themed fishing game with like a Resident Evil inventory to manage, and you can upgrade your boat. It was cool. I think for me, just like the very ending, which I won't spoil, was a little bit of an anticlimax, and I think they could have done something really bold with the ending. But yeah, it was a really cool thing, and I will keep an eye on whatever those guys do next. And yeah.
That's that.
Yeah.
Are there any thoughts for 2024? I don't, like...
Ooh, yeah, that is next. Yeah, it's honestly looking kind of interesting.
I maybe I haven't looked at the list for a little while, but it just right now there doesn't, and we're already like a month into 2024. It really doesn't feel like there's much coming out this year.
Probably just like unannounced release dates that will sneak up somewhere. But yeah, it's hard to tell at the moment.
Yeah, it's surprisingly barren for the year right now, which is strange. Outside of like February and March, which have a couple of big weird Japanese games coming out, which is always fun. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to Dragon's Dogma and Rise of the Ronin, which are the same day, which is weird.
Oh right, yeah. That's Team Ninja, right? Yeah, Rise of the Ronin.
That's kind of all I have on my radar.
Yeah, I'm very curious about Dragon's Dogma, and I look forward to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because it's looking like a crazy Japanese video game, which is what I wanted from Final Fantasy 16. I think if 16 had been that, I would not have been interested in 7 so soon after, but because 16 was so dull, it's actually made me more interested in 7, but I wish it was like 30 hours instead of 50. But what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not much past March, though, and that's odd.
No. Yeah, I'm sort of not sure what's coming out this year. And maybe there won't be a lot. Maybe everyone just accidentally shipped everything in 2023. Maybe.
Wouldn't be the first time we've had a quiet year. So
we will see, man. We will see. I kind of hope just a bunch of indies come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
Yeah, I think that about wraps up another year. Year 11, the beginning of a new decade.
Oh, God.
Fucking hell. Oh, shit. I'm getting too old. My voice can't even handle it anymore, apparently.
No, I know.
Yeah, I think that does it for another year. As usual, let us know down below what your games of the year were. Feel free to scream at us for our horrible gaming opinions.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Especially me.
Also, let us know what to look forward to for 2024. Because apparently we don't know anything about this year.
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Huh.
We'll obviously have more podcasts and The Tower episodes coming up across 2024, talking about games as they come out. But if you're just here for these, we will see you next year. Let's hope it's a good one.
Bye.
Take it easy. Bye.